The silvery light of the waning moon spilled through the cabin window as Aria methodically folded her clothes, each movement deliberate and quiet. Her hands trembled slightly as she packed her few belongings into a worn leather backpack. Herbs from her garden, a small book of healing remedies, and the silver pendant her mother had given her before passing. The pendant that was meant to be worn on her wedding day, with a true mate, not the mockery of a ceremony she'd endured a year ago. She paused, listening to the rhythmic breathing of the pack house. Pre-dawn was the only time when everyone, even the sentries, grew lax, their wolves drowsy with the coming morning. The forest called to her, promising freedom from the hollow ache that had become her constant companion. You don't belong to him. We don't belong here. Her wolf paced restlessly beneath her skin. Had been since the day of her mating ceremony. Aria closed her eyes, the memory washing over her unbidden. 1 year earlier, "You look beautiful," her friend Lyra whispered, adjusting the crown of white forest blossoms in Aria's hair. The son of Alpha Blackthorn will be stunned speechless. Aria's smile felt brittle as glass. "I've never even met him." "But think of what this means for our pack," Lyra reminded her. "Since your father died, we've been vulnerable. This alliance will protect everyone." The weight of responsibility settled heavy between her shoulder blades as Aria nodded. Her father had been dead barely 3 months, and already Alpha Mercer had arranged her mating to secure their borders against the encroaching rival packs. Her mother would have fought this, but her mother was long gone. The ceremony itself passed in a blur of faces and rituals. Enlay Blackthorn stood tall and imposing beside her, his midnight hair and sharp features drawing admiring glances from the she-wolves. His eyes, a striking amber that seemed to glow against his tanned skin, betrayed nothing of his thoughts as they spoke the sacred words. When his teeth grazed her neck in the ritual claiming bite, Aria waited for the rush of connection. The magical bond that was supposed to bloom between true mates. Nothing came. Just the sharp sting of teeth and an emptiness that echoed through her soul. Her wolf had recoiled, whimpering in confusion. Wrong. Not ours. Not mine. Later, in the privacy of their new quarters, Enlay had looked at her with an unreadable expression. "You feel it too, don't you?" he'd asked, his voice lower than during the ceremony. "Something's missing." She'd nodded, unable to lie. "My wolf. She doesn't recognize you." His jaw had tightened. "It doesn't matter. The packs are joined now. We'll make this work." But they hadn't. Not really. Aria shook off the memory and secured her pack closed. The alliance still stood. Technically, they were mated in the eyes of both packs, but the true mate bond had never formed. Every day, the emptiness between them had grown, a chasm neither could cross, despite Enlay's increasingly desperate attempts. Just yesterday, she'd caught him watching her, with such naked longing that it had physically hurt. He deserved someone whose wolf would sing for his, not this half-life they were living. She slung the pack over her shoulder and crept toward the door. The wooden floor creaked beneath her feet, and she froze, heart hammering against her ribs. "Were you going to say goodbye?" His voice came from the shadows, low and rough with emotion. Aria closed her eyes briefly before turning to face him. Enlay stood in the doorway to their bedroom, moonlight casting his face in silver and shadow. He wore only low-hanging sleep pants. His broad chest bare and his dark hair tousled. Despite everything, her traitorous body responded to the sight. He was objectively beautiful, had always been kind to her in his distant way. But kindness wasn't enough, not without the bond. I thought it would be easier this way, she whispered. He crossed the room in 3 long strides, stopping just short of touching her. Easier for whom, Aria? The pack that depends on our union. Your sister, who finally has protection. Or just easier for you? The accusation should have made her angry, but all she felt was bone-deep sadness. For all of us, Enlay, this isn't working. You know it as well as I do. I know that you've never given it a chance to work. His voice broke slightly, revealing the pain beneath his controlled exterior. You closed yourself off from the moment we met. That's not true, she protested, though part of her wondered. Had she been so determined not to be forced into this match that she'd unconsciously blocked any possibility of connection? No, her wolf knew, not mine, not ours. Then look me in the eyes and tell me you feel nothing, he challenged, stepping closer. The heat of his body radiated toward her, his scent, pine and smoke, and something uniquely him, enveloping her senses. Tell me your wolf doesn't respond at all to mine. Aria forced herself to meet his gaze. Those amber eyes that haunted her dreams held not anger but raw, undisguised hurt. She began, but the words stuck in her throat. The truth was more complicated than either of them wanted to admit. Her human side wasn't immune to him, but the mate bond, the magical connection that should have sealed their wolves together, remained stubbornly absent. You're running from something that frightens you, he said softly, reaching up to brush a strand of hair from her face. His fingers lingered against her cheek. I just haven't figured out if it's me you're afraid of or the possibility that I might actually matter to you. Aria stepped back, breaking the contact. The packs will survive without our bond. Tell them whatever you need to. That I was unfaithful, unworthy. Stop. The word came out as a growl, his eyes flashing wolf gold in the darkness. I would never dishonor you that way. Then what would you have me do? She asked, frustration breaking through her calm facade. Spend another year pretending? Watching you grow to resent me more with each passing moon? Your father already talks of bringing in another female. He knows as well as we do that this mating is in name only. Pain flashed across his features. Is that what you think I want? What you want doesn't matter. What I want doesn't matter. The bitter truth of pack politics hung between them. Without a true bond, this union is meaningless. Your father needs an heir with a proper mate bond. The pack needs a true Luna. Enlay's shoulders sagged slightly, the first real sign of defeat she'd ever seen in him. Where will you go? The question surprised her. She'd expected arguments, perhaps even force. Not this quiet acceptance. My grandmother had a cabin in the neutral territories, she admitted. I'll be safe there while I figure things out. He nodded slowly, his expression unreadable once more. Take the silver dagger from the chest. The territories aren't as neutral as they once were. Aria blinked back unexpected tears. Even now, he thought of her safety. I'll give you a day's head start, he continued, his voice rough. After that, I don't know what the Alphas will decide. The implication was clear. He wouldn't pursue her immediately, but he couldn't promise the same for others in their packs. Thank you, she whispered. He moved toward her again, and this time she didn't step away. His hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing across her cheekbone with aching tenderness. I would have spent my life trying to be worthy of you, he said so softly she almost didn't hear. I still would. Something cracked in her chest. Not the mate bond forming, but something equally powerful. Regret, perhaps, or the first fragile seed of what could have been love, if fate had been kinder. He leaned down, pressing his lips to her forehead in the gentlest of kisses. "Be safe, little wolf." Then he stepped aside, clearing her path to the door. Aria clutched her pack tighter and moved past him, each step feeling simultaneously like cowardice and bravery. At the threshold, she paused, looking back one last time. Enlay stood motionless in the moonlight, his expression a complex mixture of loss and determination. Something in his stance told her that while he was letting her go now, this wasn't truly goodbye. Her wolf, so resistant to their bond, whined softly in confusion. Run now. Think later. With one final glance at the mated life she was abandoning, Aria slipped into the pre-dawn darkness, the cool forest air carrying the promise of freedom, and the heavy cost that came with it. 3 days of hard travel had left Aria's muscles aching and her resolve wavering. The neutral territories weren't kind to lone wolves, especially females. Twice she'd crossed paths with rogues whose hungry gazes had followed her too long. And once she'd been forced to hide in a hollow tree trunk while a patrol from a neighboring pack passed dangerously close. When the weathered cabin finally came into view through the mist-shrouded pines, tears of relief stung her eyes. Her grandmother's sanctuary stood just as she remembered. A small structure of stone and timber nestled against a cliff face, nearly invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. "Home," her wolf whispered, though Aria had only visited here as a child. The door creaked as she pushed it open, dust motes dancing in the shaft of afternoon light that followed her inside. The air smelled of pine, earth, and the lingering trace of dried herbs. Her grandmother's signature scent. "We made it," she murmured, dropping her pack on the worn wooden table. She moved through the cabin methodically, opening shutters to let in light and air. A thin layer of dust covered everything, but otherwise, the cabin seemed untouched since her grandmother's passing 5 years ago. The pack had considered it too remote to be useful, allowing it to be forgotten. Exactly what Aria needed. As she shook out musty blankets and swept the floor, her mind drifted to what she'd left behind. Not just the pack that had been her family, but him, Enlay. The memory of his face in those final moments, unguarded pain replacing his usual stoic mask, made her hands falter on the broom handle. Few in either pack would believe Enlay Blackthorn capable of such gentleness. To them, he was the Alpha's heir who had earned his position through ruthless efficiency and unwavering loyalty. The wolf who had once tracked a traitor for 7 days without rest, returning with blood on his muzzle and cold satisfaction in his eyes. 9 months ago. "Did you know your mate once killed 6 rival wolves in a single battle?" Lyra had whispered during the spring gathering, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and admiration as they watched Enlay across the clearing. He stood with his father's warriors, his powerful frame tense, even in the celebratory atmosphere. While others laughed and drank, he remained vigilant, amber eyes constantly scanning the perimeter. "He's different when we're alone," Aria had replied, though even she couldn't fully explain the contradiction. The warrior who could snap a man's neck without hesitation was the same one who carefully untangled her hair each night with patient fingers. "They say he doesn't feel anything," another she-wolf added. "That's what makes him so dangerous." Later that night, Aria had found him alone on their porch, staring at the moon with an expression of such profound loneliness that it had stolen her breath. When he sensed her presence, the mask had slipped back into place, But not before she glimpsed the truth. Enlay Blackthorn felt everything. He had simply mastered the art of hiding it. Aria shook off the memory and continued her work, stoking a small fire in the stone hearth. Outside, shadows lengthened as afternoon surrendered to evening. Her wolf paced restlessly within, making her skin prickle with unnamed anticipation. "What is it?" she asked silently. "What do you sense?" No answer came, just an uncomfortable sensation of incompleteness that had plagued her since the mating ceremony. She moved to unpack her meager supplies, fingers brushing against the silver dagger Enlay had insisted she take. Another contradiction in the complex tapestry of the man she had left behind. The political alliance that had bound them together had been born of desperation. After her father's death, their pack had become vulnerable. Neighboring territories had begun testing boundaries, sensing weakness in their grief. 14 months ago. "Aria, you must understand what's at stake," Alpha Mercer said, his weathered face grave as they stood in her father's old study. "Without a strong alliance, our pack will be absorbed, or worse, by spring." "And I'm to be the price?" she'd asked, anger barely contained beneath her calm exterior. "Mated to a stranger to solve your problems?" "To solve all our problems," he corrected. "You're the daughter of a respected bloodline. This mating would honor your father's memory." "My father would never have forced me to mate without love." Alpha Mercer's expression softened slightly. "Times have changed, child. The Eastern Territories grow more dangerous each moon. The Blackthorn pack offers protection we desperately need, and Enlay needs a mate of proper breeding." "And if we're not compatible? If the bond doesn't form?" "The ceremonial mating will be enough to seal the alliance. Whatever comes after is between you and your mate." His tone made it clear the discussion was over. 3 weeks later, she'd stood beside Enlay Blackthorn, speaking words that were meant to bind their souls while diplomatic smiles masked political calculation. Night had fallen completely now. Aria lit a pair of candles and sat before the fire, hugging her knees to her chest. The reality of her situation settled heavily on her shoulders. She was alone, technically still mated, with limited supplies and winter approaching in a few months. Yet beneath the practical concerns ran a deeper current of unease. Her wolf continued to pace, whining occasionally as if hearing a call too distant for Aria's human ears to detect. "What is it you want?" she asked her wolf spirit again, closing her eyes to better sense the creature that shared her soul. Images flickered through her mind. Moonlight on water, running through unfamiliar forest paths, and strangest of all, amber eyes watching her with an intensity that made her heart race. Enlay's eyes. "Stop it," she whispered aloud. "He's not ours. You made that perfectly clear." Her wolf growled in frustration, offering no clarity, only increasing her confusion. A log shifted in the fireplace, sending sparks cascading upward. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the shutters she'd secured earlier. Aria wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, suddenly aware of how truly alone she was. For a wild, irrational moment, she wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake. What if this emptiness wasn't about a missing mate bond, but something broken within herself? What if she'd run from the one person who might have helped her understand? The image of Enlay's face as she left, hurt barely contained beneath his warrior's discipline, rose unbidden in her mind. "I would have spent my life trying to be worthy of you," he had said. Not demanding, not claiming, simply offering a devotion she couldn't comprehend. A sudden crack outside startled her from her thoughts. Aria froze, senses immediately alert. Her wolf surged forward, heightening her hearing and smell as she carefully moved to the window. The forest outside was dark, the mist hanging between trees creating shifting shadows that played tricks on the eyes. For a moment, she saw nothing unusual. Then a branch swayed unnaturally about 50 yards from the cabin. Heart pounding, she reached for the silver dagger, grateful now for Enlay's insistence. Had someone followed her? A rogue wolf drawn by a lone female's scent? Or worse, had her former pack already sent hunters to retrieve her? Her wolf, strangely, didn't seem alarmed. Instead, the creature pushed against her human consciousness with unusual intensity, almost eager. Another sound, the subtle shift of weight on forest debris, confirmed she wasn't alone. Whatever watched from the darkness was being careful, methodical, not the behavior of a mindless rogue. Aria extinguished the candles with quick, efficient movements, allowing the fire's glow to be her only light. In near darkness, her wolf's vision strengthened, scanning the tree line with predatory focus. For the briefest moment, she thought she glimpsed a pair of eyes reflecting firelight from the forest edge, not with a rogue's maddened hunger, but with intelligent purpose. Then they were gone, leaving her wondering if fear had conjured the vision. Her wolf, however, remained alert and oddly satisfied, as if confirming something long suspected. "What do you know that I don't?" Aria asked her other half. The only answer was a restless longing that made no sense, a pull toward the very darkness she should fear, and a name her wolf refused to acknowledge, yet couldn't seem to forget. Enlay. The eastern sky had barely begun to lighten when Enlay crouched to examine the forest floor. Aria's scent lingered on a fallen log, faint but unmistakable. Lavender, rainwater, and that distinctive note that was uniquely hers. His wolf rumbled with satisfaction at finding her trail again. 3 days of tracking, and always maintaining the same distance. Close enough to intervene if she encountered danger, far enough to honor the freedom he'd promised. "You should claim what's yours," his wolf urged, as it had since she'd left. "She's not ours," he murmured aloud. Not truly? The contradiction tore at him daily. His wolf recognized her as mate, despite the bond's failure to form. It made no sense. In all the pack histories, there were no records of wolves recognizing mates without the bond following. Enlay stood, rolling his shoulders to ease the tension of nights spent sleeping against tree trunks rather than in proper shelter. The small camp he'd established a half-mile from Aria's cabin offered minimal comfort, but it served his purpose, keeping watch without intrusion. His father's words echoed in his mind as he gathered his few possessions. "You let her go?" Alpha Blackthorn's voice had been dangerously soft when Enlay reported Aria's departure. "I gave her space," Enlay corrected, standing rigid before his father's imposing desk. Forcing her return would only push her further away. "Space," his father repeated, the word dripping with contempt. "While our alliance crumbles and your claim to leadership weakens by the hour." Enlay kept his expression neutral, despite the fury building beneath his skin. "The alliance stands. Our packs benefit regardless of where she sleeps." "Don't be naive." His father rose, power radiating from his massive frame. At 53, Damon Blackthorn remained one of the most feared alphas in the territories. The council requires a mated pair with a true bond before you can assume leadership. Without it, your cousin Varen has every right to challenge you when I step down. "Varen doesn't want leadership," Enlay said. though uncertainty colored his words. His cousin had been unusually interested in pack politics lately. "Everyone wants power," his father said flatly. "And your unmated status makes you vulnerable. Find her, bring her back. Complete the bond before the winter gathering, or I'll be forced to consider other options for succession." Enlay shook off the memory and continued moving silently through the forest. The old hunting cabin came into view through the trees, small but sturdy, nestled against a rocky outcropping that provided natural protection. Smart choice. Aria had always been more strategic than most gave her credit for. He circled wide, ensuring no threats lurked nearby, before settling on an overlook that provided a clear view of the cabin without invading her immediate territory. Smoke rose from the chimney, carrying her scent on thermal currents that made his wolf whine with longing. Soon, he promised the creature. But on her terms, not ours. Inside the cabin, Aria woke with a gasp, heart pounding against her ribs. The nightmare clung to her consciousness, iron chains around her wrists. Her father's disappointed face, and walls closing in until she couldn't breathe. Always the same dream since the mating ceremony. She pushed sweat-dampened hair from her face and drew a shaky breath. Dawn light filtered through the crude shutters, casting patterns across the wooden floor. Another day of freedom. Another day of uncertainty. Her wolf, strangely, seemed calmer than it had in months. The restless pacing that had characterized their union since the mating had subsided, replaced by an odd contentment that Aria couldn't explain. More confusing were the images that came during the deepest part of sleep. Not the nightmares of confinement, but dreams of running through moonlit forests, a darker wolf at her side. Enlay's wolf, powerful and steady, matching her pace as they moved in perfect synchronicity. She stretched, joints popping after another night on the too small bed. 5 days in the cabin had established a routine. Gather herbs and firewood in the morning, hunt during midday, reinforce the cabin's defenses in the afternoon. Simple, predictable, and entirely hers. Yet something had shifted in the forest overnight. Some subtle change in the air that made the hair on her nape rise. She hadn't survived as the daughter of a warrior by ignoring such instincts. "We're being watched," her wolf confirmed. Aria moved with deliberate casualness, retrieving the silver dagger from beneath her pillow before approaching the window. She scanned the tree line methodically, seeking any disruption in the natural patterns of light and shadow. Nothing obvious presented itself, but the sensation persisted. Whoever watched had skill, possibly pack-trained. Not rogues, then, with their barely controlled bloodlust. Something more disciplined, more dangerous. Her first thought, that Alpha Mercer had sent hunters to retrieve her, sent ice through her veins. Her second thought was somehow worse. Enlay, but why would he come himself? He could have sent trackers, could have ordered her return. Unless he's protecting us, her wolf suggested with uncomfortable eagerness. Or ensuring I don't escape permanently, Aria muttered, though the accusation felt hollow even to her own ears. Enlay had never been cruel, never used his considerable strength against her, even when his frustration was evident. She debated her options. Confront the Watcher, flee deeper into neutral territory, or continue as if unaware of the surveillance. None appealed. In the end, necessity decided for her. The cabin's supplies were limited, and she needed to hunt. Whoever watched would either reveal themselves or not. She dressed warmly, braided her hair tightly, and tucked the silver dagger into her boot before stepping outside into the crisp morning air. Enlay watched Aria emerge from the cabin, admiring despite himself the confident set of her shoulders and the seamless way she melded with the forest within moments. She knew he was there. Her slightly altered route and the careful way she scanned her surroundings confirmed it, but she chose not to acknowledge his presence. Pride swelled in his chest. Most would be frightened, knowing they were observed. Aria simply adapted, continuing her purpose while maintaining awareness. She would have made a formidable Luna. Will make? His wolf corrected stubbornly. She's still ours. He shadowed her hunt at a respectful distance, alert for other predators that might mistake her solitude for vulnerability. Twice he diverted potential threats. Once a pair of rogues following her scent trail, and later a territorial bear whose path would have intersected with hers. The rogues would carry his message back to others of their kind. This she-wolf was under protection. The bear required only a firm display of dominance to seek easier prey. By midday, Aria had taken down a young deer with impressive efficiency. As she field-dressed her kill, Enlay realized he'd been spotted. She stared directly at his position among the pines, knife pausing in her work. For a moment, neither moved. Then, with deliberate slowness, Aria cut a portion of venison and placed it on a clean stone at the edge of her clearing before returning to her task. An offering, not friendship, but acknowledgement, permission to approach. Enlay hesitated, then stepped from the shadows, keeping his movements measured and non-threatening. Her scent grew stronger as he approached, honey and wildflowers beneath the metallic tang of fresh blood. "You're a long way from packlands," she said without looking up from her work, voice carefully neutral. "So are you." He remained at the edge of the clearing, respecting the boundary she'd established with the placement of the meat offering. Her hands worked with practiced precision, separating usable portions from waste. "Did your father send you to drag me back in chains?" "No one sent me." The half-truth tasted bitter. While his father demanded her return, Enlay's presence here was his own choice. "And there are no chains." Aria glanced up, then, sea-green eyes assessing him with the same thoroughness she'd used to scan the forest earlier. "Then why follow me?" A dozen answers rose to his lips. Duty, obligation, the politics of succession. All true, none complete. "Because I need to understand," he said finally, the honesty surprising even himself. "Understand what?" Her knife stilled. "Why our wolves recognize each other while the bond refuses to form." The question that had haunted him for a year, through endless nights in their shared bed, with an unbridgeable chasm between them. Aria's expression flickered with something unreadable. "Your wolf recognizes mine?" Enlay nodded once, the admission costing him more than she could know. It revealed weakness, uncertainty, qualities his father had spent a lifetime training out of him. "That's..." She frowned, knife moving again with less certainty. "That shouldn't be possible." "No," he agreed. "It shouldn't." Silence stretched between them, filled only with the sounds of the forest and the soft rhythm of her blade against meat and bone. Finally, she wrapped several portions in large leaves, tucking them into her pack before washing her hands in a nearby stream. When she turned back to him, her expression had softened almost imperceptibly. "My wolf dreams of running with yours." The admission clearly cost her, her chin lifting slightly, in unconscious defiance of her own vulnerability. "Yet you left." he said, unable to keep the hurt from his voice. I left because every day we pretended. Something inside me withered. Aria's honesty matched his own. Because watching you try so hard to reach something that wasn't there was destroying us both. Enlay moved forward then, retrieving the meat she'd offered. The gesture, accepting sustenance from her hands, carried meaning in wolf culture that transcended words. Not submission, but willingness to share territory temporarily. The winter gathering approaches, he said carefully. My father expects. Your claim to leadership depends on a true mate bond. She finished for him, surprising him with her political awareness. She'd always seemed disinterested in pack hierarchy. He nodded, not bothering to hide the gravity of his situation. Varen circles like a vulture, seeking support among the elders. Your cousin never struck me as ambitious. Neither did the snake in Eden, I imagine. The rare attempt at humor drew a startled, almost smile from her. Aria shouldered her pack, the movement drawing his attention to the delicate curve of her neck, where his claiming mark had faded to nearly nothing. Physical evidence of their bond's failure. I can't be what your father wants, she said quietly. Not without the bond. And we both know that's not something we can force, no matter what the packs need. No, he agreed. But we could try to understand why it failed. She studied him, wariness warring with something else in her expression. You're not here to bring me back. Not until you're ready. The promise came easily. But I won't leave you unprotected in neutral territory either. Irritation flashed across her features. I can protect myself. Against 2 rogues and a silverback bear? All before noon? He raised an eyebrow, satisfaction blooming as surprise registered on her face. You've been busy? Her tone carried reluctant admiration. Merely maintaining an appropriate perimeter. The formal words couldn't hide the protectiveness beneath them. For the first time in months, something like understanding passed between them. Not the mate bond, but perhaps its precursor, respect. There's a clearing half a mile east of the cabin, she said after a moment's consideration. Better for camping than wherever you've been sleeping. Close enough to hear a call for help, far enough for privacy. The concession, acknowledging his presence without accepting his claim, was more than he'd hoped for. Acceptable terms, he replied with careful neutrality, though his wolf practically preened at the invitation to remain closer. Aria nodded once, then turned to leave, pausing only briefly to add, The nightmares are worse here than they were in the pack house. The unexpected confession hung in the air between them. A fragile thread of connection. Before he could respond, she disappeared into the trees, leaving Enlay to wonder if perhaps they were both hunting something neither fully understood. Dawn revealed the first gift. A bundle of rare moonflower herbs tied with twine, placed carefully beside Aria's water bucket. She stared at it, fingers hovering above the delicate white blooms that were notoriously difficult to find, even for experienced gatherers. What are you doing, Enlay? She murmured, finally picking up the bundle and bringing it to her nose. The sweet, subtle fragrance triggered memories of her mother's healing remedies. Moonflower for dreamless sleep, particularly effective against night terrors. She'd mentioned the nightmares only once during their brief encounter in the forest. He'd been listening, truly listening. The realization settled uncomfortably in her chest. 3 days passed, each dawn bringing something new. A perfectly carved wooden comb after she'd broken her old one. Fresh honeycomb wrapped in leaves when she'd mentioned missing sweetness. River stones polished to a gleam that caught the firelight beautifully when arranged on her mantle. Never was Enlay present when she discovered these offerings. Never did he mention them when their paths occasionally crossed in the forest. Just silent gifts that spoke of attention and care without demanding recognition. "He's courting us properly," her wolf approved, growing increasingly restless each time Enlay's scent lingered near their door. "He's trying to manipulate us into returning," Aria argued aloud, though the accusation felt hollow even to her own ears. She'd seen his camp in the clearing, spare, functional, with no concessions to comfort, despite the autumn chill that crept into the forest at night. He wasn't leaving anytime soon, and part of her, a part she refused to examine too closely, was glad for it. On the 7th morning, Aria found not herbs or trinkets, but fresh tracks. Unfamiliar wolf prints circling her cabin while she slept. Not Enlay's distinctive paw print that she'd grown to recognize, but 3 different sets, moving with purpose. Her skin prickled with warning as she followed their path. They'd investigated every corner of the clearing before heading east, toward Enlay's camp. Without conscious decision, she was moving, knife in hand, following the tracks, through underbrush still wet with morning dew. Her wolf pushed forward, heightening her senses as worry, not for herself, but for him, overcame caution. The scent hit her first. Blood, sharp and metallic, cutting through the forest's natural perfume. Then sounds of conflict, the distinctive snarls of wolves engaged in battle. She crested a small rise and froze at the scene below. 3 wolves, massive grey creatures with the distinctive silver markings of the Stone Ridge pack, circled Enlay's human form. Blood darkened his left shoulder, but he stood in fighting stance, a long hunting knife in each hand. The remains of his shredded tent lay scattered across the clearing. One wolf lunged, teeth snapping toward Enlay's injured side. He pivoted with preternatural speed, blade slicing across the attacker's muzzle. The wolf yelped, retreating momentarily, as another took its place in the relentless rotation. "They're toying with him," Aria realized with cold certainty. Wearing him down before the kill. 3 against 1, with Enlay already wounded and unable to shift, while maintaining his weapon advantage. The calculation was simple and brutal. He wouldn't survive much longer. Her wolf made the decision before her human mind could intervene. Between one heartbeat and the next, Aria felt her bones crack and reform, fur erupting through skin as her wolf took control. The shift was faster than she'd ever experienced, driven by urgency and something deeper she refused to name. She launched from the ridge, a streak of silver-white fur landing between Enlay and the largest attacker with teeth bared, and a warning growl that rumbled from deep in her chest. Surprise rippled through the clearing, from the Stone Ridge wolves at her unexpected appearance, from Enlay at her unconscious choice to stand with him. For a single heartbeat, everything stilled. Then chaos erupted. The largest wolf recovered first, lunging toward her with jaws spread wide. Aria ducked beneath the attack, teeth closing on the tender flesh of her opponent's underbelly as she rolled. Blood filled her mouth, the coppery taste fueling her wolf's battle rage. From the corner of her eye, she saw Enlay moving with renewed purpose. No longer defensive, but attacking with calculated precision. One of his blades found its mark in the shoulder of the smallest wolf, driving deep between muscle and bone. They fought as if they'd trained together for years. Aria driving opponents into Enlay's reach, Enlay covering her flanks when she committed to an attack. No words, No signals. Just instinctive coordination that made them lethal in tandem. When it ended, 2 Stone Ridge wolves lay wounded but alive. The third and largest limping into the forest with his tail tucked submissively. Message delivered. This territory, temporary though it might be, was defended. Aria shifted back to human form, the transformation leaving her trembling and vulnerable in a way the battle hadn't. Naked and blood-spattered, she knelt beside Enlay, who had collapsed to one knee, pressing his hand against the deepening crimson stain on his shoulder. "Your cabin," he managed through clenched teeth. "Safer there." She nodded, helping him to his feet. Questions could wait. His wound couldn't. With one arm around his waist and his good arm across her shoulders, they made slow progress through the forest. His much larger frame made supporting him difficult, but Aria found strength in urgency. Why were Stone Ridge wolves this far from their territory? She asked to keep him talking, concerned by the pallor spreading beneath his tanned skin. Testing boundaries, he grunted. Looking for weakness. In neutral territory. Nothing stays neutral when power shifts. His breathing grew more labored with each step. Rumors of our failed bond have spread. Every ambitious pack is reassessing alliances. The implications chilled her more than the autumn air against her bare skin. Their personal failure had wider consequences than she'd allowed herself to consider. By the time they reached the cabin, Enlay's skin had taken on a greyish tinge that frightened her more than she wanted to admit. She guided him to the single chair, his larger body dwarfing the simple furniture as she worked quickly to gather healing supplies. "This needs cleaning," she said, examining the wound more carefully. Teeth marks punctured deep into muscle. Not immediately life-threatening, but serious enough to concern her. "It will hurt." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I've had worse." "I'm sure you have," she murmured, remembering stories of his battles. Her fingers worked with practiced efficiency, cleaning away blood to reveal the true extent of the damage. 3 against 1 is poor odds, even for the mighty Enlay Blackthorn. 4, actually, he corrected, wincing as she applied herbal antiseptic to the wound. "One ran when he heard you coming." Something in his tone made her pause. "You knew I would come?" His amber eyes met hers with uncomfortable directness. "I hoped." The simple honesty of his answer disarmed her more effectively than any elaborate explanation could have. She returned to her task, crushing dried herbs into a poultice that would prevent infection and speed healing. "You've been leaving gifts," she said after a moment, needing to fill the silence that hummed with unspoken significance. "Yes." No explanation. No justification. "Why?" Enlay was quiet so long she thought he might not answer. When he did, his voice carried a rawness she'd never heard before. "Because you deserve to be courted properly. Not claimed through political arrangement or pack necessity. Courted as a woman, not a strategic asset." Heat rose to her cheeks as she secured a bandage over the poultice. "We're already mated, technically. In ceremony only." His uninjured hand captured hers as she finished tending his wound, warm fingers curling around her wrist with gentle pressure. "A true mating happens in stages. Recognition, courtship, acceptance, bonding. We had only the shell of the ritual, none of the substance." The contact sent warmth spiraling through her arm and settling low in her belly. A physical reaction she couldn't control and didn't fully understand. Her wolf pushed forward, yearning toward his touch with embarrassing eagerness. Why now? She asked, not pulling away despite the warning bells in her mind. We lived as mates for a year. You never spoke of courtship then. Pain flickered across his features. Not from his wound, she sensed, but from memories. I was trying to be what my father expected, what the pack needed. The perfect heir, the flawless warrior. His thumb traced small circles against her pulse point. I didn't know how to be a mate. The confession, so at odds with the cold, controlled image he projected to others, struck her speechless. When you left, he continued, it was like waking from a trance. I realized I'd been so focused on meeting expectations that I never considered what you might need from me. His gaze held hers, intensity burning behind amber depths. I don't want you to come back because of obligation or pack politics. If you return, I want it to be because you choose to. Aria's throat tightened with unexpected emotion. She looked down at their joined hands, her smaller one still captured in his larger grip, and saw not a symbol of possession, but of connection. The packs, she began. Can wait, he finished. This is between us. Something shifted inside her, like pieces of a complex puzzle rearranging themselves into a new pattern. Not a complete picture, but perhaps the beginning of one. Before she could respond, exhaustion overtook him, his larger body slumping slightly, as blood loss and battle fatigue claimed their due. The vulnerable sight of Enlay Blackthorn, legendary warrior, feared enforcer, struggling to remain conscious in her small cabin, altered something fundamental in her perception. With gentle hands, she guided him to her bed, the only suitable place for his frame. He went without protest, eyes already closing as his head met the pillow that would now carry his scent, mingled with hers. Rest, she murmured, drawing a blanket over him. We're safe here. As if her words were permission, he surrendered to unconsciousness, features softening in sleep until he looked younger, unburdened by the weight of expectation he always carried. Aria stood watching him, conflicting emotions battling within her chest. The man who had once been a political inconvenience, then a rejected mate, now presented a third identity. Protector, gift-giver, truth-speaker. Her wolf, for once, was silent, watching with her in rare harmony as Enlay's chest rose and fell in steady rhythm. Outside, the forest carried on its autumn preparations, unaware that within a small cabin at its heart, something had begun to bloom out of season. Not the supernatural mate bond they had both expected, but perhaps something equally powerful in its own way. Trust. For 3 days, Enlay slept and healed in Aria's small bed while she kept watch from a makeshift pallet on the floor. The wolf bite had been deeper than she initially thought, infection setting in despite her herbal remedies. Fever dreams made him restless, occasionally calling out in his native tongue. Words she couldn't understand, but whose desperate tone made her heart clench. By the third night, the fever broke. Aria dozed in the chair beside him, exhausted from tending his wounds and gathering fresh herbs. She woke to find amber eyes watching her in the firelight. How long? His voice was rough from disuse. 3 days, she answered, reaching for a cup of water. Stone Ridge wolves carry something in their saliva. My grandmother used to call it grey fever. The infection's common after their attacks. He accepted the water, fingers brushing hers in the exchange. You stayed. The simple observation carried layers of meaning neither was ready to examine. You would have done the same, she replied, busying herself with checking his bandages to avoid his gaze. His larger hand captured hers as she worked, stilling her movements. Thank you." The sincerity in his voice made it impossible not to meet his eyes. What she found there, gratitude, yes, but also something deeper, more vulnerable, made her throat tighten. "You're healing well," she said, gently extracting her hand. "Another day of rest, and you'll be strong enough to return to your camp." If her words disappointed him, he hid it well. "I've imposed on your hospitality long enough." An awkward silence fell between them, filled with unspoken questions. Aria stood, needing distance from the intensity of his presence. "You should eat something. I'll heat some broth." Alone at the small hearth, she breathed deeply, trying to center herself. 3 days of caring for him, watching over his fevered sleep, had created an intimacy more profound than their year of formal mating. She'd memorized the features of his face in repose, learned the rhythm of his breathing, discovered scars she'd never known existed despite sharing his bed for months. "We belong with him," her wolf insisted with increasing frequency. "Then why didn't the bond form?" she whispered to the flames. The question that had haunted them both for a year seemed to echo in the small cabin. No answer came from the fire, from her wolf, or from her own heart. Later, with Enlay sleeping again and the cabin quiet save for the crackling fire, Aria found herself drawn to a loose floorboard she'd discovered while cleaning. Curiosity had made her pry it up the day before, revealing a small space, beneath where something was wrapped in oilskin. Now, with questions swirling in her mind and her wolf unusually quiet, she retrieved the hidden package and carefully unwrapped it. 3 leather-bound journals emerged, the distinctive flowing script on their covers immediately recognizable as her grandmother's hand. Aria traced the faded writing with reverent fingers. Aria Mason had been more than just her grandmother. She had been the pack's most respected healer and keeper of old ways before her death. Her knowledge of wolf traditions and magic had been unparalleled, her wisdom sought by packs throughout the territories. The first journal contained what she expected: herbal remedies, moon cycle observations, birth and death records for the pack. The second documented the political alliances and territorial disputes of decades past, meticulously noting how they were resolved. It was the third journal, smaller and bound in red leather, that made her pulse quicken. Its title, stamped in faded gold letters, read simply, "Mate, Bonds, the Ancient Understanding." Aria's hands trembled slightly as she opened it, the pages crackling with age. Her grandmother's elegant script filled each page, interspersed with sketches of wolves, moon phases, and symbols Aria didn't recognize. She began to read, firelight illuminating words written decades before she was born. The true mate bond is not merely instinct or convenient pack arrangement, as modern wolves often believe. It is an ancient magic, older than our written history, that binds complementary souls for purposes beyond reproduction or pack strengthening. A genuine bond forms in stages, not instantly as young wolves are taught to expect. Recognition may occur immediately, but the bond's completion requires mutual acceptance, trust, and the removal of barriers both conscious and unconscious. Aria paused, her grandmother's words resonating with what Enlay had said days earlier about proper courtship stages. She read on, increasingly engrossed as the journal detailed case studies of bonds that formed unexpectedly or failed despite apparent compatibility. Then a passage made her breath catch. It is little understood among our kind that true mate bonds can be blocked by various factors. The most common is previous trauma, particularly betrayal by pack or family. The wolf spirit, designed to protect its human counterpart, may reject even a genuine mate connection if it associates bonds with pain or danger. Less common, but more insidious, is magical interference. There exist rituals, practiced by those seeking control over pack dynamics, that can suppress a forming bond. These workings leave subtle traces, recurring nightmares of confinement, physical discomfort during moon phases, and most tellingly, contradiction between the wolf's recognition and the human's resistance. Aria's hands grew cold despite the fire's warmth. Nightmares of confinement had plagued her since the mating ceremony. And the contradiction, her wolf's increasing interest in Enlay despite her human mind's rejection, mirrored her grandmother's description exactly. She read until dawn broke, absorbing her grandmother's detailed accounts of wolves whose bonds had been suppressed by trauma or magic, only to form powerfully once the blockage was identified and addressed. Methods for testing whether interference was present. Rituals for clearing magical barriers between mates. When sunlight finally crept through the cabin windows, Aria closed the journal, her mind reeling with possibilities she'd never considered. What if she couldn't complete the thought? Its implications too overwhelming. If her grandmother's writings were accurate, there existed the possibility that she and Enlay truly were mates, that their bond had been blocked rather than non-existent. But by what? By whom? And why? Movement from the bed drew her attention. Enlay was watching her, his gaze sharp despite days of fever. "You haven't slept," he observed. Aria glanced down at the journal still clutched in her hands, then back at him. A decision crystallized in her mind. Not complete trust, not yet, but willingness to share a possibility that concerned them both. "I found my grandmother's journals," she said, approaching the bed with the red leather book. "There's something you should see." Enlay read silently, his expression shifting from curiosity to focused concentration as he absorbed Aria Mason's words. Aria paced before the fire, too agitated to sit still as he turned pages with careful fingers. When he finally looked up, the intensity in his amber eyes sent a shiver down her spine. "You've had nightmares," he said quietly. "Since the ceremony?" It wasn't a question, but she nodded anyway. Always the same. Being trapped, unable to breathe. "And your wolf?" Aria hesitated, the admission feeling dangerously intimate. "Recognizes yours. Has from the beginning, though she wouldn't accept the bond." Enlay closed the journal gently, respect for its age evident in his handling. "My father consulted with a practitioner before our mating, a woman from the Eastern Territories who specializes in ensuring favorable outcomes." The implication hung between them, too significant to dismiss, yet too fantastical to immediately accept. "You think someone magically interfered with our bond?" Aria voiced the question that seemed absurd, despite the evidence mounting in her mind. "I think," he replied carefully, "that there are many who benefit from our pacts, being allied but dependent on external approval. If we had formed a true bond, we'd be uncontested as leaders," she finished, political understanding dawning. "Neither your father nor Alpha Mercer could control the alliance through us." Enlay nodded, shifting to sit at the edge of the bed. He moved with more strength than he'd shown since the attack, though caution remained in his movements. "There's more," he said after a moment, eyes fixed on the faded carpet. "My father has given me until the winter gathering to secure our bond." He looked up, meeting her gaze directly. After that, he's arranged another mating, a female from the coastal packs whose father controls 3 major trading routes. The revelation shouldn't have hurt. She had left after all, had rejected their mating in every way that mattered. Yet something twisted painfully in her chest at the thought of Enlay bound to another. "How long until the gathering?" she asked, voice steadier than she felt. 6 weeks. 6 weeks to determine if their bond had been magically suppressed. 6 weeks to decide if what existed between them was worth fighting for. 6 weeks before Enlay would be forced into another politically expedient mating that might be as empty as their own had been. Aria turned to the fire, seeking answers in its dancing flames. Her grandmother's journal offered possibility, but no certainty. Tests that might reveal interference. Rituals that might clear blockages if they existed. Nothing guaranteed. Behind her, she heard Enlay rise from the bed, his breathing still slightly labored from healing. The floorboards creaked as he approached, stopping just close enough that she could feel his warmth against her back without actually touching. "I won't ask you to return based on theories and old writings," he said, voice low and earnest. "Whatever you decide, whatever we discover, it must be your choice." His continued respect for her autonomy, even with his future hanging in the balance, triggered a realization that had been building since she found him wounded in the forest. Enlay Blackthorn was not the cold, duty-bound warrior she had married. Or perhaps he was, but he was also something more. A man capable of growth, of putting her needs before pack expectations. "Your father won't accept my return without the bond," she said softly. "No," he agreed. "He won't." "And if the journal is wrong? If there was no interference?" His silence told her he'd considered this possibility already. Finally, he said, "Then I face my fate, as I've always done, with acceptance of what cannot be changed." Aria turned to face him, closer than she'd intended, near enough to see the gold flecks in his amber eyes and the new lines around his mouth that spoke of pain both physical and emotional. "And if it's right," she whispered, "if our bond was blocked." Something kindled in his expression. Not quite hope, but its precursor. "Then we face that truth together, however you wish to proceed." The "we" hung between them. Not assumption, but invitation. Not demand, but possibility. Her wolf, quiet throughout their exchange, suddenly pushed forward with unexpected force. Truth. Find the truth. For once, Aria found herself in complete agreement with her other half. Whatever lay between them, compatibility or its absence, magical interference or natural failure, deserved to be understood. She owed that much to herself, to Enlay, and to the packs whose futures intertwined with their own. "My grandmother describes a testing ritual," she said, her decision made. "Something that can reveal whether interference exists without committing us to anything more." Relief and something deeper flashed across Enlay's features. "When?" "The half moon," she replied. 3 nights from now." Their gazes held, mutual understanding passing between them. Not reconciliation, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of a path toward truth, whatever that might reveal. Outside, autumn wind rattled the cabin's shutters, carrying the first hints of the winter to come. Inside, a fragile seedling of possibility took root between 2 wolves who had been joined by ceremony but divided by forces perhaps greater than their own resistance. Whether it would flourish or wither remained to be seen. The half-moon came and went, their ritual yielding cryptic results that left more questions than answers. Grandmother Eleanor's test, a complex working involving moonstone dust and blood essence, had revealed shadows around both their auras where their bond should form, neither confirming nor denying interference. Inconclusive, Aria had whispered, disappointment evident despite her attempt at detachment. Enlay had merely nodded, his expression carefully neutral as he helped clean away the ritual materials. He'd returned to his rebuilt camp afterward, respecting boundaries, even as something shifted between them. A fragile thread of possibility neither was ready to examine too closely. Now, 2 weeks later, the full moon approached, bringing with it the inevitability they'd both been avoiding. For werewolves, the full moon wasn't just folklore, it was biological imperative. While most could control their shifts at will throughout the month, the full moon's pull stripped away human restraint, forcing their wolves to surface completely. Aria paced the confines of her cabin, anxiety building as sunset approached. Normally, wolves ran together on full moons, the pack bond providing stability during their most primal state. Alone, especially for a female in unclaimed territory, the night would be dangerous. A soft knock at her door startled her from her thoughts. Enlay stood on her threshold, dressed simply in clothes that would be easy to remove before shifting. His expression conveyed understanding without words. He knew her dilemma. "The Stone Ridge wolves may return tonight," he said, by way of greeting. "Even with your scent markers, they'll be emboldened by the moon." Aria nodded, hyper-aware of his presence, as the moon's influence began tugging at her control. "I know. We could run together," he suggested carefully. "Not as mates, but as allies, safer for both of us." The practical solution made sense, yet they both recognized the risk. Their wolves, less constrained by human hesitation, might act on instincts their human sides weren't ready to acknowledge. "Say yes," her wolf urged, with unusual forcefulness. "We need to run with him tonight." "As allies," Aria agreed after a long moment, ignoring the leap of anticipation in her chest. "Nothing more." Something flickered in Enlay's amber eyes. Relief, perhaps, or satisfaction. "I'll wait for you at the eastern clearing. Moonrise is in an hour." The full moon crested the mountains like a silver coin, its light transforming the autumn forest into a realm of shadow and luminescence. Aria approached the clearing, already feeling her wolf pushing against her skin, eager for release. Enlay stood at the clearing's center, his tall frame silhouetted against the moonlight. He'd already removed his shirt, and his bare torso gleamed like burnished bronze in the silvery light. The sight triggered an embarrassing heat in her belly that she attributed to the moon's influence. "Ground rules," she said, stopping several paces from him. "We run the Eastern Territories only. No crossing into claimed lands." He nodded, muscles shifting beneath tan skin, as he shrugged off his remaining clothes with the unself-consciousness of a born shifter. "If we get separated, we meet back here before dawn." Aria turned away, both for privacy and to hide the flush creeping up her neck. She undressed quickly, folding her clothes on a fallen log before closing her eyes and surrendering to the transformation. The shift came easily under the full moon's power. Bones realigned with practiced fluidity, fur spreading across her skin like quicksilver as her consciousness expanded to accommodate her wolf's more primal awareness. Where her human mind perceived in concepts and language, her wolf understood through scent, sound, and instinct, a simpler yet in some ways more honest perspective. When she opened her eyes, the world had transformed. Night forest became a tapestry of scents and sounds. each carrying meaning her human senses could never grasp. The silver-white fur of her wolf form gleamed in the moonlight as she stretched, reveling in the freedom of 4 powerful limbs. A movement drew her attention. Where Enlay had stood now prowled a massive black wolf, his amber eyes the only feature that remained unchanged in the transformation. Larger than any in their pack, his wolf form radiated power and grace as he approached. Aria's wolf reacted instantly, not with the wariness her human side expected, but with unmistakable recognition. "Mate," her wolf acknowledged simply, the concept carrying none of the complications her human mind attached to it. The black wolf circled her, his movements respectful, yet intimate as he scented her. When his muzzle brushed against her neck, a shiver of pleasure rippled down her spine. Her wolf welcomed the contact, leaning into his larger form with natural ease. "This is dangerous," her human consciousness cautioned, but the warning felt distant beneath the moon's influence and her wolf's certainty. Enlay's wolf stepped back, then playfully dropped into a hunting crouch, tail swishing in clear invitation. "Run with me." Without hesitation, Aria bounded past him, launching into the forest with exhilarating speed. Behind her, she heard his larger form giving chase, powerful paws eating the distance between them. They ran, as wolves were meant to, freely, joyfully, their bodies moving in perfect harmony with the forest around them. Over fallen logs, through moonlit clearings, alongside a silver stream that caught the moon's reflection in its rippling surface. When they flushed a deer from its resting place, they hunted together with seamless coordination, bringing down the buck with practiced efficiency. After feeding, they cleaned each other's muscles with tender attention, the intimacy of the gesture feeling natural in their wolf forms. No politics, no past complications, no future uncertainties, just the pure connection of 2 wolves beneath the full moon. As the night deepened, they found themselves atop a rocky outcropping, the valley spread below them in a patchwork of forest and meadow. Aria's wolf stretched out beside Enlay's larger form, their fur touching as they surveyed what felt in that moment like their shared domain. His massive head rested gently atop hers, a gesture of affection and protection that made her wolf sigh with contentment. "This is right," her wolf insisted as their bodies pressed together in the cool night air. "This is how it should be." The rightness of it was undeniable in their wolf forms, whatever complications their human sides might impose. Eventually, exhausted from their run and soothed by each other's presence, they curled together in a sheltered hollow, fur against fur, heartbeats synchronizing as they drifted into slumber beneath the watching moon. Consciousness returned slowly, human thoughts reassembling as the moon's power waned with approaching dawn. Aria became aware first of warmth, then of the weight of an arm draped across her waist, and finally of the solid chest pressed against her back. Her eyes flew open, realization crashing through the lingering fog of transformation. They had shifted back to human form during sleep, their naked bodies entwined as intimately as their wolves had been. Enlay's breathing remained deep and even against her neck, his arm holding her securely against him. Heat bloomed everywhere their skin touched. Her back against his chest, her hips cradled by his, their legs tangled beneath the canopy of leaves that partially sheltered them from the early morning air. She should move, should extricate herself from this dangerous intimacy before he woke, should re-establish the boundaries their wolves had so thoroughly ignored. Yet she remained motionless, her body betraying her with its contentment in his embrace. The hard planes of his chest felt right against her softness. His arm protective rather than possessive across her waist. His scent, pine and earth, and something uniquely him, filled her senses, calming her racing thoughts. "This is where we belong," her wolf murmured, still near the surface after the full moon run. "No," she whispered aloud, the denial lacking conviction even to her own ears. Behind her, Enlay stirred, his breathing changing as he crossed into wakefulness. She felt the exact moment he realized their situation, his body tensing briefly before deliberately relaxing, giving her the opportunity to pull away if she wished. She didn't. "Aria!" Her name on his lips was barely audible, a question and acknowledgement wrapped in a single word. "Our wolves had other ideas about boundaries," she said, aiming for lightness but achieving only breathless uncertainty. His arm remained across her waist, neither tightening nor withdrawing. They always have. The simple truth of his statement hung in the pre-dawn air between them. Their wolves had recognized each other from the beginning, had known something their human sides refused to acknowledge. "We should head back," she said finally. Practical concerns breaking through the strange spell that held them. "It will be light soon." Enlay's arm slipped from her waist as he moved away, allowing her space without comment. The sudden absence of his warmth left her shivering in the cool morning air. They dressed in silence, each finding their discarded clothes from the previous evening with quiet efficiency. The comfortable synchronicity of their wolves had been replaced by awkward human awareness, though something of their night's connection lingered in the glances they couldn't help exchanging. "Your wolf," Enlay said as they began the journey back to the cabin. She responded to mine differently than before. Aria nodded, unable to deny what they'd both experienced. "More accepting. More than accepting." His amber eyes held hers for a moment before returning to the path. She recognized mine as mate. The word hung between them, impossible to dismiss after the night they'd shared. Not just the physical closeness, but the effortless harmony of their run, the natural coordination of their hunt, the peaceful contentment of resting together beneath the stars. "That doesn't mean," she began. "I know." He cut her off gently, sparing her the need to articulate the complicated reality they faced. "Our human sides have more to consider than instinct alone." Yet they both knew something had fundamentally shifted. The division between their wolves' certainty and their human doubts had narrowed, creating a dissonance impossible to ignore. As they approached the cabin, Enlay paused at the edge of the clearing, maintaining the boundary he'd always respected despite their night of proximity. "What happens now?" he asked, the question encompassing far more than just their immediate plans. Aria looked at him, really looked, taking in the strong features she'd woken against, the amber eyes that watched her with carefully restrained hope, the powerful body that had felt so right curled around her own. "I don't know," she admitted honestly. "My wolf has never been clearer about what she wants. My mind has never been more confused." Enlay nodded, understanding in his expression. "The winter gathering is 4 weeks away," he reminded her, the unspoken deadline hanging between them. "I know." She hesitated, then added, "My grandmother's journal mentioned another ritual, more involved than the first. It might reveal what's blocking our bond, if anything is." Hope flickered across his features before he carefully controlled his expression. "When?" "The dark moon. 9 days from now." Their gazes held, mutual understanding passing between them. Time was running out, for them and for the alliance their packs had built on their mating. Whatever decision they reached would have consequences beyond their personal happiness. 9 days, he agreed, the commitment evident in his voice. As Aria watched him turn and disappear into the forest towards his camp, her body still humming with awareness of his touch, she couldn't deny the truth any longer. Whatever stood between them wasn't lack of compatibility. Her wolf knew with absolute certainty that Enlay Blackthorn was their mate. The question that remained, the one that would determine both their futures, was why her human heart still hesitated to accept what her wolf so clearly understood. The forest grew restless as storm clouds gathered on the horizon, mirroring Aria's unsettled thoughts. 7 days had passed since the full moon, since waking in Enlay's arms, with her wolf purring in contentment while her human side panicked. 7 days of avoiding the truth that had become increasingly difficult to deny. She sat cross-legged on the cabin floor. Her grandmother's journal spread around her like fallen leaves. The ritual for the dark moon required ingredients she'd been gathering methodically. Moonstone dust, wolf's bane harvested under starlight, and most troubling, blood freely given from both potential mates. Blood magic, she murmured, tracing the elegant diagrams her grandmother had drawn. Is this truly wise? A sharp knock at the door startled her from her thoughts. Her senses heightened immediately. The scent wasn't Enlay's familiar pine and earth, but something older, layered with herbs and wood smoke. When she opened the door, an elderly woman stood on her threshold, leaning on a gnarled walking stick, carved with wolf symbols. Silver hair gathered in a complex braid revealed her status. An elder, though not from Aria's pack. Magdalena Mason's granddaughter, the woman sated, roomy eyes sharp despite her advanced years. You have her look about you. Aria blinked in surprise. Few remembered her grandmother by her formal name. You knew her? A smile creased the elder's weathered face. Eleanor and I shared many moons of knowledge. I am Ruth of the Eastern Valleys. She glanced meaningfully at the darkening sky. Perhaps you might offer shelter to an old woman before the storm breaks. You're attempting to unblock a mate bond, Ruth stated, without preamble once seated before the fire, her gnarled hands cradling a cup of herbal tea. I sensed the residue of testing magic the moment I crossed your boundary. Aria nearly dropped the pot she was holding. How? Child, I've been a bondkeeper for 60 years. The signs are clear to those who know how to read them. The old woman's eyes, surprisingly bright in her aged face, studied Aria with uncomfortable perception. What's less clear is why a Mason woman would need such testing. Your bloodline carries the strongest bonding magic in the territories. My bloodline? Aria set aside the pot and sat opposite the elder, hunger for knowledge overcoming her surprise at the intrusion. Ruth nodded, sipping her tea with appreciation. The Mason women have always been special among our kind. Healers, yes, but also keepers of mate bond wisdom. Your grandmother was particularly gifted in seeing true pairings. The elder's head tilted curiously. Did she not prepare you for your own bonding? Pain flickered across Aria's features. She died before I came of age, and my mother left when I was young. Understanding dawned in Ruth's eyes. Ah, then you don't know about the Mason curse. Curse? The word sent a chill down Aria's spine. Ruth set her cup aside, settling more comfortably in the chair. Not a curse in truth, though many have called it such. The women of your bloodline carry an ancient gift, the ability to form bonds of exceptional strength. But with that gift comes a complication. Outside, thunder rumbled as the approaching storm encroached on the forest. Mason women instinctively resist initial bonding. Ruth continued. Their magic requires absolute certainty before accepting a mate connection. While other she-wolves might bond with compatible males, your line demands perfect alignment, or creates its own barriers. The explanation struck Aria with the force of revelation, pieces falling into place with dizzying speed. My wolf recognized him from the beginning, she whispered, but wouldn't complete the bond. Self-protection, Ruth nodded. Your bloodline's magic ensures only genuine, freely chosen bonds can form. No political arrangement or forced mating can override it. My mother, Vivian Mason. Ruth's expression softened with old memory. She fought her bond fiercely. 3 times she ran from your father before finally accepting their connection. Aria leaned forward, hungry for knowledge of the mother who had disappeared from her life so early. What happened? Your father was patient beyond measure, Ruth said with a small smile. He understood what others didn't, that pursuing her would only strengthen her resistance. Instead, he gave her freedom to choose, even when it cost him greatly. The parallel to her situation with Enlay was too striking to ignore. Like her father had with her mother, Enlay had respected her boundaries, offering space when others might have demanded compliance. My mother eventually accepted the bond? Aria asked, trying to reconcile this new information with her fragmented childhood memories. Ruth's smile faded. She did. Their bond was exceptional, the strongest I've witnessed in my lifetime. Perhaps too strong. She paused, choosing her words carefully. When your father died, she couldn't survive without him, Aria finished, old pain resurfacing. Her mother hadn't simply left after her father's death. She had faded away. Her grief so profound that remaining with the pack had become impossible. Such is the double-edged nature of the Mason gift, Ruth confirmed gently. The bonds you form run deeper than most. The joy is unparalleled, the loss devastating. Thunder cracked directly overhead, rain beginning to lash against the cabin windows as the storm finally broke. The timing felt significant, nature itself emphasizing the weight of revelation. You believe Enlay is truly my mate, Aria said. Not a question, but a realization. I believe your magic believes it, Ruth corrected. Your resistance isn't rejection. It's your bloodline demanding certainty before surrendering to a bond that, once formed, cannot be broken without shattering you both. The elder reached into a pouch at her belt, withdrawing a small object wrapped in soft leather. Your grandmother asked me to give you this when the time came. I've carried it for 20 years, waiting for our paths to cross. Aria accepted the package with trembling hands, unwrapping it carefully to reveal a pendant, silver and moonstone, fashioned into the shape of a crescent moon embracing a small wolf. The Mason bond token, Ruth explained. Passed from mother to daughter for generations. It's said to clear the path between true mates when the bearer is ready to accept the connection. Aria stared at the pendant, its surface cool against her palm. How did you know to find me now? Ruth's smile held mysteries accumulated through decades of witnessing wolf magic. The old ways have their own timing, child. I felt the pull 3 days ago, the same night as the full moon, I'd wager. Heat rose to Aria's cheeks at the memory of waking in Enlay's arms, her body fitting against his, as if they'd been carved from the same wood. Your ritual at the dark moon, Ruth continued, nodding toward the journals still spread across the floor. It's unnecessary. The block isn't external magic as you suspected. It's your own bloodline's protection, waiting for your conscious choice. Then why didn't my grandmother's test reveal this? Aria asked, confused. Because it isn't interference in the traditional sense. It's inheritance, your birthright as a Mason woman. Ruth reached forward, closing Aria's fingers around the pendant. The question isn't whether he's your true mate. Your wolf already knows the answer. The question is whether you're ready to accept what that means. Twilight had descended by the time Ruth departed, the storm having passed and left the forest glistening with rain. The elder had shared more stories of Aria's mother and grandmother, painting a picture of a bloodline of strong women whose mate bonds had shaped pack histories for generations. Aria stood on her porch, the pendant hanging from a leather cord around her neck, its weight unfamiliar, yet somehow right against her skin. Her thoughts swirled like the storm that had just passed. Revelation, understanding, and lingering uncertainty, creating their own tempest within her. A movement at the forest edge drew her attention. Enlay emerged from the trees, his tall frame unmistakable even in the gathering darkness. He approached slowly, giving her time to retreat inside if she wished. She didn't. "You had a visitor," he observed, stopping at the bottom of the porch steps. Rain had darkened his hair to midnight, droplets still clinging to his shoulders. "An elder. She knew my grandmother." Aria's fingers unconsciously rose to touch the pendant. "She had information about my bloodline." Enlay's gaze followed the movement, recognition flashing in his amber eyes. "The Mason token. I've heard stories." "You know of it?" Surprise colored her voice. He nodded, remaining where he stood despite the obvious desire to move closer. "My father's library contains histories of the major bloodlines. The Mason women are mentioned with particular respect." "Then you know what it means?" She needed to understand how much he comprehended about what lay between them. "I know it's passed from mother to daughter," he said carefully, "and that it's connected to mate bonds of unusual strength." Aria descended one step, reducing the distance between them. "The elder, Ruth, said my resistance isn't rejection, it's inherited protection, ensuring I choose freely rather than from obligation." Something like hope flickered across his features before being carefully controlled. "What does that mean for us?" "It means there was never external interference," she admitted. "The block comes from within me, from magic that demands absolute certainty before allowing a true bond to form." Enlay absorbed this information, his expression thoughtful rather than triumphant. "Your wolf has recognized mine from the beginning." "Yes," she acknowledged, the admission easier now with understanding of her bloodline's nature. "But the human part of me needed more than ceremony and arrangement." "Needed?" He noted her use of past tense, a question in his eyes. Aria descended another step, now close enough to catch the scent of rain on his skin. "I'm still learning what I need," she said honestly. "But Ruth helped me understand why I left, and why my wolf dreams of yours despite my human resistance." Firelight from the cabin windows illuminated the intensity in Enlay's gaze as he looked up at her. "The winter gathering approaches," he said quietly. "My father's patience grows thin." "I know." The reminder of their deadline hung between them, pressing but no longer threatening. "If you need more time," he said, the words clearly difficult, "I could speak with my father, delay the arrangement with the coastal pack. The offer, and what it would cost him, stole her breath. Defying his father, risking his position, perhaps even his place in the pack, all to give her freedom to choose without pressure. "You would do that?" she asked, searching his face for any sign of manipulation or calculation. "I would. No hesitation, no conditions. Just 2 words that carried the weight of sacrifice. In that moment, something shifted inside Aria, a wall crumbling that had stood firm since their arranged mating. Not complete surrender, but acknowledgement of a truth her wolf had recognized long before her human heart caught up. This man, with all his complexity and contradiction, might truly be worthy of the bond her bloodline's magic protected so fiercely. "The dark moon ritual," she said after a moment. "Ruth says it's unnecessary, given what we now know. But I'd still like to perform it, not to test for interference, but as a conscious choice to open myself to the possibility of what exists between us." The hope in Enlay's eyes became unmistakable, though he contained it with admirable restraint. "You're considering accepting the bond?" "I'm considering," she clarified, "exploring what a true bond might be, freely chosen rather than arranged. No guarantees, no obligations, just possibility." He nodded, understanding the significance of what she offered. Not commitment, but willingness to lower the barriers her bloodline had raised. "Thank you," he said simply, the words carrying depths of meaning beyond their simplicity. As they stood there in the rain-washed evening, something new bloomed between them. Not the supernatural mate bond they had both been seeking, but its necessary precursor, trust freely given, with full knowledge of what might follow. The Mason pendant warmed against Aria's skin, as if acknowledging her first step on a path her mother and grandmother had walked before her. The path toward accepting a bond that her bloodline both feared and craved, protected and celebrated. Whether that path would lead to full acceptance remained to be seen. But for the first time since their arranged mating, Aria felt the weight of expectation lift from her shoulders, replaced by something infinitely more powerful: choice. The dark moon ritual had changed everything and nothing. In the 3 days since they'd sat facing each other within a circle of sacred herbs, blood freely given to test the boundaries between them, Aria had felt the walls around her heart thinning. Not collapsing, but becoming more permeable with each shared moment. Their wolves had responded powerfully to the ritual, prowling closer to the surface of their human consciousness. Eager for the connection, their rational minds still approached with caution. The pendant Ruth had given her remained warm against Aria's skin, a constant reminder of her bloodline's gift and its protection. Morning mist curled around the trees as she gathered herbs near the stream, her basket half full of late autumn plants. Winter's approach left precious little time for stockpiling medicinal supplies. A twig snapped behind her, too heavy to be forest wildlife. Aria straightened, instinctively scenting the air. Not Enlay. Someone else. Pack wolf, male, unfamiliar. She turned slowly, one hand dropping to the silver dagger at her belt. The wolf who emerged from the trees was tall and lean, with sharp features that might have been handsome if not for the calculating coldness in his grey eyes. He wore the formal travelling leathers of the Blackthorn pack, though his stance suggested he considered himself above such territorial formalities. "The runaway Luna," he said by way of greeting, his voice carrying the cultured accent of pack aristocracy. "You're even lovelier than rumours suggest." "You're trespassing," Aria replied calmly. though her wolf bristled at the intrusion. "Who are you?" "Aria Blackthorn." He offered a slight bow that managed to convey mockery rather than respect. "Cousin to your mate, or should I say, your former mate?" The name registered immediately. Enlay's cousin, the one positioning himself as alternative heir should Enlay's claim to leadership falter. His timing couldn't be coincidence. "What brings a Blackthorn so far from pack territory?" she asked, maintaining distance between them. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Opportunity, sweet Luna. Your departure has created quite the stir in both our packs. Alpha Blackthorn grows impatient with my cousin's failure to secure a proper mate bond. And this concerns you how?" She kept her voice neutral despite the anger kindling beneath her skin. Varen moved closer, his movements deliberately predatory. "The Blackthorn pack requires a strong alliance with the Mason bloodline. If Enlay cannot provide it..." His gaze traveled over her with insulting thoroughness. "Perhaps I can." Understanding dawned with sickening clarity. "You've come to claim me in his place." "Claim is such a primitive word," he replied smoothly. "I prefer to think of it as offering you an alternative arrangement. One with a wolf who knows how to properly dominate his female." Disgust coiled in her stomach. "I'm not a prize to be won or traded." Varen's laugh held no warmth. "Of course you are. Why else would my uncle have arranged your mating? The Mason bloodline carries power all the packs covet. Your mother's bond with your father created the strongest alliance the territories had seen in generations." His knowledge of her family history set alarm bells ringing in Aria's mind. This wasn't a spontaneous visit. Varen had researched her, prepared for this confrontation. "If you know anything about my bloodline," she said carefully, "you know forcing a bond is impossible. Force is rarely necessary when persuasion will do." His smile sharpened. "Alpha Blackthorn has authorized me to offer you protection for your sister, continued territorial rights for your mother's pack, and personal freedom within reasonable boundaries." The carefully constructed offer confirmed her suspicions. This was no rogue action, but a calculated move with the Alpha's blessing. Enlay's position was even more precarious than he'd admitted. Before she could respond, another presence materialized from the trees. Enlay stepped into the clearing, his expression controlled, but eyes burning with barely contained fury. "Cousin?" he acknowledged, positioning himself subtly between Aria and Varen. "You're far from home?" Varen's smile widened. "Just having a friendly conversation with the lovely Aria, explaining her options now that you failed to secure the bond." "My failure?" Enlay's voice remained measured, despite the tension radiating from his powerful frame. "Or my father's interference?" Surprise flickered across Varen's features before he recovered his composure. "Careful, cousin. That borders on accusation of the Alpha." "Not accusation. Knowledge." Enlay's certainty suggested he'd discovered something in their time apart. "The elder Ruth has been most informative about certain rituals performed before our mating ceremony." The mention of Ruth seemed to unsettle Varen, though he hid it quickly. "Whatever fantasies you've constructed to excuse your inadequacy as a mate are irrelevant. I'm here on official pack business." "To claim what was never yours to take," Enlay responded, a dangerous edge entering his voice. Varen's eyes narrowed. "She is unclaimed territory now. Her departure from your bed opened the way for new arrangements." Aria stepped forward, anger overriding caution. I'm standing right here, and I'm not territory to be claimed by anyone. Both men turned to her, Varen with poorly concealed disdain for her interruption, Enlay with something that looked surprisingly like pride. The female has spirit, Varen commented. I'll enjoy taming that. The threat hung in the air for one tense heartbeat before Enlay moved. Not toward Varen as both expected, but toward Aria. He reached for her hand, his touch gentle despite the rage evident in his rigid posture. Aria is free to choose her own path, he said, addressing his cousin, while his gaze remained on her. If that path leads away from me, from both our packs, that is her right. But she will not be claimed as prize or property by you or anyone else. The declaration, so at odds with traditional pack hierarchy where females were often treated as political assets, left Varen momentarily speechless. Aria's fingers tightened around Enlay's, the gesture unconscious but significant. You would surrender pack advantage for female sentiment? Varen finally asked, incredulity breaking through his calculated facade. I would honor the choice of a woman whose bloodline carries more wisdom about true bonds than our pack has possessed in generations. Enlay's voice carried absolute conviction. Something my father, and apparently you, have forgotten. Varen's expression hardened. Then you forfeit your claim to her, and to leadership. I make no claim on Aria that she doesn't freely accept, Enlay replied. As for leadership, a true alpha protects choice, not suppresses it. The rival's face flushed with anger. Pretty words that will mean nothing when the council votes at the winter gathering. Without a bonded mate, you're finished, cousin. Perhaps, Enlay acknowledged without flinching. But I'll face that consequence, knowing I honored what matters most. The simple statement, delivered without drama or posturing, struck Aria with unexpected force. This was no political calculation or attempt to impress her. This was Enlay revealing his core beliefs, even at potential cost to everything he'd worked toward. Varen studied them both, reassessing in light of this unexpected development. Alpha Blackthorn will hear of this defiance. Tell him what you wish, Enlay replied, unmoved by the threat. My position remains unchanged. With a final contemptuous glance at them both, Varen turned and disappeared into the forest. His departure as calculated as his arrival. When his presence had faded from their senses, Aria released the breath she hadn't realized she was holding. He'll report directly to your father. Yes. Enlay didn't elaborate on what that meant for his future. She studied his profile, noting the determined set of his jaw and the unwavering certainty in his amber eyes. You meant what you said, about honoring my choice, even if it leads away from you. It wasn't a question, but he answered anyway. Every word. The realization settled in her chest like a warm stone. This man, raised in the rigid hierarchy of the Blackthorn pack, had found the courage to place her autonomy above tradition, above politics, above his own interests. Why? Enlay finally turned to face her fully, his expression more open than she'd ever seen it. Because a true bond cannot exist without freedom to choose. And because you deserve nothing less, regardless of where that choice leads. Before she could respond, the sky darkened abruptly. They both looked up as clouds rolled in with unnatural speed, black and heavy with impending violence. Stormfront, Enlay said, scenting the air. A bad one. We should get back to the cabin. The first fat raindrops began to fall as they hurried through the forest, the comfortable silence between them charged with unspoken significance. By the time the cabin came into view, the gentle rain had transformed into a downpour, and distant thunder announced worse to come. They burst through the door, just as lightning split the sky, illuminating the small space in stark white, before plunging it back into rain-darkened gloom. Aria moved quickly to light the fire, while Enlay secured the shutters against the intensifying wind. Varen's appearance wasn't coincidence, she said once the fire caught, casting warm light across the cabin floor. Your father sent him. Enlay nodded, shrugging out of his sodden jacket. Testing my resolve, likely. Or yours. And now? She handed him a blanket for his wet hair, their fingers brushing in the exchange. Now my father knows I won't force your return. His voice remained steady despite the implications. And that I won't stand aside if he sends others to claim you. Outside, the storm intensified, rain lashing against the windows with percussive force. Inside, a different kind of storm brewed, one of unspoken truths and shifting boundaries. Would you truly surrender your position as heir? She asked, needing to understand the depth of his commitment. Everything you've worked toward? Leadership means nothing without honor. He met her gaze directly, droplets of rain still clinging to his dark lashes. And there is no honor in treating you as property to be claimed. The simple declaration struck deeper than any passionate speech could have. This wasn't romantic posturing or calculated seduction. This was Enlay's core truth, revealed without artifice. Something shifted in Aria's chest, a door long closed beginning to open. Thunder crashed directly overhead, the cabin trembling with its force. A moment later, the distinct sound of splitting wood cut through the storm's roar. The roof, Enlay said, already moving toward the source of the noise. A section of ceiling near the back wall had splintered, rain pouring through a growing fissure where a branch had punctured the wood. They worked together without discussion, Aria gathering buckets to catch the worst of the deluge, while Enlay assessed the damage. The branch is still embedded, he reported, reaching up to test the stability of the surrounding wood. If I remove it, the hole will widen. Another crash of thunder, another tremor through the small structure. The rain intensified, turning their small breach into a serious threat. Cold water streamed down Enlay's arms as he held the fractured beam, preventing further collapse. We need to move to your camp, Aria decided, seeing the danger as the old cabin groaned against the storm's fury. This structure might not hold. Enlay shook his head, water dripping from his hair. Too dangerous to travel in this. The forest will be full of falling branches and flash floods. As if confirming his assessment, lightning struck nearby, the crack of a falling tree, emphasizing the peril waiting outside. They were trapped, the cabin increasingly unsafe, the forest actively dangerous. The storage cellar, Aria said suddenly, remembering the small space beneath the main floor that her grandmother had used for preserving herbs. It's reinforced with stone. We can wait out the worst there. They moved quickly, gathering essentials, blankets, water, the remaining dry firewood. Aria located the trapdoor beneath a worn rug, pulling it open to reveal a small staircase leading to a surprisingly spacious underground room. The sweet scent of dried herbs and earth rose from the darkness. There should be lanterns, she said, descending carefully with a bundle of blankets in her arms. My grandmother kept this space well supplied. Enlay followed, the last of the dry wood cradled against his chest. Above them, the cabin continued to groan under the storm's assault, the sound of water now streaming through multiple breaches in the roof. The cellar was cool but dry, its stone walls providing security. The wooden structure above could not. Aria found the promised lanterns and matches. Soft golden light, soon illuminating their temporary sanctuary. Root vegetables lined crude shelves along one wall, while bundles of dried herbs hung from the low ceiling. A small hearth, built into the stone wall, offered the possibility of warmth. "Your grandmother was well prepared," Enlay observed, arranging the firewood near the hearth. "She believed in self-sufficiency," Aria replied, spreading blankets across the packed earth floor. This space saved her during many winter storms. As Enlay coaxed a small fire to life in the ancient hearth, Aria became acutely aware of their situation. Trapped together in an intimate space, with no chance of maintaining the careful distance they'd preserved since her departure from the pack. Above them, a tremendous crash suggested part of the cabin's roof had finally surrendered to the storm's fury. Water trickled through the trapdoor's edges, confirming their decision to seek shelter below had been well timed. "We should get out of these wet clothes," she said practically, though her heart rate accelerated at the implication. "There's no sense in risking cold sickness." Enlay nodded, his expression carefully neutral, despite the intimacy of their circumstances. "I'll turn away while you change." True to his word, he faced the wall as Aria quickly shed her sodden garments, wrapping herself in one of the larger blankets. The rough wool, against her bare skin, was a poor substitute for dry clothing, but it would preserve warmth. "Your turn," she said when she'd finished, offering him the same privacy by focusing intently on arranging their supplies. The small fire cast dancing shadows across the stone walls as they settled on opposite sides of the hearth, each wrapped in blankets. The storm raging overhead, creating a strangely peaceful backdrop to their unexpected sanctuary. "Thank you," Aria said after a comfortable silence had stretched between them, "for what you said to Vern about honoring my choice." Enlay looked up from the flames, his amber eyes reflecting golden in the firelight. "I meant every word. I know." And she did know, with a certainty that surprised her. "That's what makes it significant." He studied her across the small fire, expression thoughtful. "May I ask you something? About your bloodline's gift?" She nodded, curious where his thoughts had turned. "Ruth spoke of the Mason women forming bonds of unusual strength," he said carefully. "Bonds that can't be broken without devastating consequences. Is that why you resisted so strongly? Fear of that vulnerability?" The question cut closer to her core truth than she'd expected. Aria looked into the flames, considering her answer. "Perhaps," she admitted finally. "I watched my mother fade away after my father died. She became a shell of herself, barely present even when physically with us. The painful memory still carried its sting years later. The idea of being so completely bound to another person that losing them would destroy me, yes, that frightens me." Enlay nodded, understanding rather than judgment in his expression. It would frighten anyone with the wisdom to comprehend it. "Yet you still sought the bond," she observed, knowing its potential cost. "I sought what I was told was necessary for leadership," he corrected gently. "Only later did I begin to understand what a true bond might mean." His gaze held hers across the flames. That understanding came largely through its absence. Another crash from above, another shower of dust from the cellar ceiling. The storm showed no signs of abating, but here, below the earth, they remained safe in their small pocket of warmth and light. "And now?" she asked, heart beating faster, though she kept her voice steady. "Now that you understand the risk, do you still want such a bond?" The question hung between them, weighted with significance beyond the immediate moment. "I want," he said carefully, "whatever you freely choose to offer. Nothing more, nothing less." The answer, so different from the possessive claim Varen had attempted, so contrary to what pack tradition would demand, settled something restless inside her. This man, who had been raised to command, to lead through strength and dominance, offered instead the gift of choice without condition. "And if what I choose is to leave once the storm passes?" she asked, testing the boundaries of his conviction. "To disappear beyond pack territories and never return?" Pain flickered in his eyes, but his voice remained steady. "Then I would wish you freedom and happiness, and face my father's consequences alone. And if what I choose is to explore the possibility of a bond without guarantee of its completion?" Hope kindled in his expression before being carefully banked. "Then I would walk that path beside you for as long as you permitted, regardless of where it led." Another crash overhead, this one severe enough to shake dust from the beams supporting the trapdoor. Instinctively, Aria moved away from directly beneath it, bringing her closer to Enlay's side of the hearth. "I think part of the roof just collapsed," she said, glancing upward with concern. Enlay nodded, rising to examine the trapdoor more closely. "The structure above is taking serious damage. We may be here until morning." The reality of their situation settled more firmly. Trapped together in this small space, separated only by the diminutive fire and their own carefully maintained boundaries. Boundaries that had grown increasingly permeable with each honest exchange. When Enlay returned to his place by the fire, he sat closer than before, close enough that she could feel the heat of him, even through the blanket she clutched around her shoulders. Neither acknowledged the reduced distance, though both were acutely aware of it. "Your cousin will report to your father tomorrow," Aria said after a moment. "What happens then?" Enlay's expression grew somber. "My father will likely send more wolves. Not to court you, but to retrieve you by force." The admission clearly pained him. "He sees your departure as challenge to pack authority, your continued absence as personal insult. And you'd stand against your own pack." The question wasn't doubtful, but wondering, trying to understand the depth of his commitment. "Against those who would deny your choice? Yes." No hesitation, no qualification. "Though I hope it doesn't come to that." The simple declaration hung between them, its implications expanding to fill the small space. Not just pretty words or temporary conviction, but a fundamental shift in how he viewed pack structure, leadership, and his own role within it. "You've changed," she observed softly. A smile touched his lips, small but genuine. "Perhaps I have simply remembered who I wanted to be before becoming what was expected of me." The storm raged on above them, a counterpoint to the growing calm between them. Aria found herself studying him in the golden lamplight, the strong lines of his face softened by firelight, the determined set of his jaw, the careful way he maintained space between them despite their proximity. Always respectful of her boundaries, even now, when those boundaries had shrunk to the few inches of packed earth between their blanket-wrapped forms. Without conscious decision, Aria closed that final distance, moving to sit beside him rather than across from him. Their shoulders touched, the contact sending warmth through her that had nothing to do with the small fire before them. Enlay remained perfectly still, his breathing the only change that betrayed his awareness of her closeness. "I'm not afraid of you," she said quietly. "I never have been." "I know." His voice was equally soft. "That's never what stood between us." "No," she agreed. "What stood between us was my fear of needing you, of becoming like my mother, so completely bound to another that losing them would destroy me." The admission cost her, each word exposing vulnerability she'd protected fiercely. Yet, speaking the truth aloud felt like setting down a burden she'd carried too long. "And now?" he asked, echoing her earlier question. Aria turned toward him, studying his profile in the gentle light. "Now I'm beginning to understand that some risks might be worth taking." Their gazes met and held, the moment expanding to contain multitudes. All they had been to each other, all they might become, all the possibilities that stretched between those points. Slowly, deliberately, she reached for his hand, finding it warm and strong beneath her tentative touch. His fingers curled around hers, the simple contact carrying more meaning than any formal claiming could have. "I can't promise what will happen when the storm passes," she said honestly. "My bloodline's gift demands certainty I don't yet possess. But I can promise to stop running from the possibility." Enlay's thumb traced gentle circles on her palm, each movement sending awareness spiraling through her. "That's more than I dared hope for." The simple honesty in his voice, the careful restraint in his touch, despite the desire evident in his eyes. These small truths spoke louder than grand declarations ever could. Without overthinking, Aria leaned forward, closing the final distance between them. Her lips met his in a kiss unlike any they'd shared during their formal mating. Not duty or protocol or public performance, but genuine exploration. Tentative at first, then deepening as something long suspended between them finally found expression. His free hand came up to cradle her face, touch reverent as if she were made of something precious and fragile. The blanket slipped from her shoulders as she moved closer, the heat of his body against her bare skin sending awareness cascading through every nerve. When they finally parted, breathing uneven and hearts racing in tandem, Aria rested her forehead against his, neither willing to move further away. "Stay with me tonight," she whispered. Not an invitation to more, but a request for continued closeness. "Just stay." Enlay nodded, understanding the boundaries of what she offered. "For as long as you wish." They rearranged the blankets into a shared nest before the fire, bodies finding natural alignment as they settled together. Aria's back against Enlay's chest, his arm draped protectively over her waist, their legs tangled in a configuration that felt both new and somehow familiar, as if their bodies remembered a connection their minds were still discovering. Above them, the storm continued its assault on the cabin and forest. Below, in their small sanctuary of stone and firelight, something new took shape between two wolves who had been mated in name long before their hearts began the slower, more meaningful journey toward true bonding. Not completion, not yet, but perhaps, at last, a genuine beginning. Morning revealed the storm's devastation. Half the cabin's roof had collapsed. Rain-soaked belongings scattered among splintered beams. Aria stood in the center of what remained, morning light streaming through the gaping hole above, illuminating the ruins of her temporary sanctuary. "It can be rebuilt," Enlay said quietly from behind her. The stone walls and foundation are sound, but they both knew rebuilding wasn't the immediate concern. The night they'd spent sheltered together in the cellar had shifted something fundamental between them. Boundaries crossed not just physically, but emotionally. Aria had woken in his arms, their bodies entwined, the pendant at her throat warmer than it had ever been. She touched it now, fingers tracing the silver crescent that seemed to pulse with its own energy since their closeness in the storm cellar. "The pendant," she said suddenly, turning to face him. "My grandmother's journal mentioned it could be used for more than just signifying bloodline. It can access buried memories." Enlay studied her, dawn light catching the amber flecks in his eyes. "You think there's more to discover?" "Ruth said our resistance isn't from incompatibility, but from my bloodline's protection." Aria moved carefully through the debris, retrieving her grandmother's red leather journal from where water had miraculously spared it. "But what if there's more? What if something truly was done to us?" She opened the journal to passages she'd been too cautious to consider before. Rituals for memory retrieval, specifically related to mate bonds. The pages described using the Mason pendant as a focus for revealing truths hidden from conscious awareness. "This requires trust," she said, looking up from the ancient text. "Complete vulnerability." Enlay moved closer, his expression open in the morning light. "Do we have that now?" The question carried no pressure, only genuine inquiry. Did they trust each other enough for this level of magical intimacy? After the storm cellar, after his defense of her choice against his cousin, after waking in his arms with her wolf content in ways she'd never experienced, Aria found the answer came more easily than she expected. "Yes," she said simply. "I believe we do." They waited until midday, when sunlight would be strongest to power the ritual. With the cabin uninhabitable, they prepared a small clearing behind the structure, sheltered by stone walls on 3 sides. Aria arranged symbols from her grandmother's journal in crushed herbs and moonstone dust, while Enlay gathered specific woods for a ritual fire. The pendant hung between them as they sat cross-legged, facing each other across the small flame. Aria had threaded it onto a longer cord, so it could bridge the space between their bodies. "My grandmother's instructions say we'll experience shared vision," she explained, hands steady as she completed the final arrangements. "Past moments when our wolves recognized each other, but our human minds were prevented from acknowledging it." Enlay nodded, his expression solemn. "And if we find nothing?" "Then we'll know the block was truly just my bloodline's protection," she replied. "Either way, we'll have certainty." She extended her hands, palms up in ritual invitation. Enlay placed his larger ones beneath hers, creating a cradle where the pendant rested between their joined palms. "The words need to be spoken by a Mason woman," she said, then began reciting the ancient language from her grandmother's text. The syllables felt strange yet familiar on her tongue, as if her body remembered what her mind had never learned. The pendant warmed between their hands, its silver surface beginning to glow with soft luminescence that belied its small size. Aria continued the incantation, feeling power building with each phrase. Not external magic being called, but something awakening within her own blood, responding to words that had activated Mason women's gifts for generations. When the final syllable left her lips, the world around them seemed to ripple, colors bleeding at the edges of her vision. Enlay's hands tightened around hers as the pendant flared with sudden brightness. Then they were falling together, consciousness sliding sideways into shared memory. 7 years earlier, the summer gathering of the 5 major packs filled the neutral valley with sounds of celebration. Music, laughter, the controlled chaos of dozens of wolf families coming together for the traditional midsummer alliance renewal. 17-year-old Aria moved through the crowd, carrying a basket of healing herbs her father had asked her to deliver to the Blackthorn Pack's healer. Her mother had been gone nearly a year, her grief-driven departure leaving Aria to assume many of her responsibilities despite her youth. "Excuse me?" she asked an older woman arranging food on long tables. "Could you direct me to the Blackthorn healer's tent?" The woman pointed toward a cluster of black and silver pavilions at the valley's eastern edge. "The large one with the caduceus symbol. Young Gerard Blackthorn is apprenticing there this summer." Aria thanked her and made her way across the gathering, admiring the different pack colors and traditions on display. These gatherings were rare opportunities to witness the broader wolf culture beyond her own pack's borders. She found the healer's tent easily enough, but hesitated at its entrance. Voices inside suggested a treatment in progress. Uncertain whether to interrupt, she decided to wait, settling on a fallen log nearby, her basket of carefully prepared herbs balanced on her knees. Her wolf, usually quiet during daytime, suddenly stirred with interest as a scent reached them. Pine, mountain air, and something distinctively male. Aria looked up to find a young man approaching from the nearby training grounds, sweat glistening on his bare chest, and a practice sword in hand. He couldn't have been more than 20, but carried himself with the confidence of someone already holding responsibility. Black hair fell across a forehead creased in concentration as he practiced forms, apparently unaware of her presence. Something about his movements, controlled power, disciplined precision, caught and held her attention. Her wolf pushed closer to the surface, a reaction so unexpected that Aria nearly gasped aloud. The sound, small as it was, caught his attention. He turned, practice sword lowering as amber ice met hers across the small clearing. Time seemed to suspend itself. Recognition flared between them, impossible, inexplicable. Wolves acknowledging each other before their human sides had exchanged a single word. He took a step toward her, expression shifting from surprise to something more intense. "Who are... Enlay?" A sharp voice cut through the moment. An older man, bearing such strong resemblance he could only be father to the young warrior, strode into the clearing. "Return to training immediately." Aria watched confusion cross the young man's, Enlay's features as he glanced between her and his father. Something almost like pain flickered in his expression, before his face composed itself into careful neutrality. "Yes, father." He turned away, but not before one last glance over his shoulder, eyes meeting hers with a question neither could articulate. As he walked away, Aria felt an inexplicable sense of loss, her wolf whining in protest at the separation. The older man's cold gaze swept over her, assessment in his eyes that made her skin prickle with warning. "You're Caleb Mason's daughter," he stated rather than asked. "Yes, sir," she replied, instinctive respect for an alpha evident in her tone. "I'm delivering herbs to your pack healer." His eyes narrowed slightly, gaze dropping to the Mason pendant visible at her throat. Smaller then, the child's version her grandmother had given her at 13. "Wait here," he commanded, then turned and followed his son. Aria remained frozen on the log, unease growing as she watched Enlay and his father engage in what appeared to be heated discussion. The older man's hand closed around Enlay's upper arm, grip visibly tight even from a distance. Whatever was said made Enlay's posture stiffen, before he nodded once, shoulders squaring in what looked like resignation. Minutes later, a woman Aria didn't recognize approached. Older, with strange symbols tattooed on her hands, and a scent that carried unfamiliar herbs and something metallic. "Alpha Blackthorn requests your assistance in his tent," the woman said, her accent marking her as from the distant Eastern Territories. A matter requiring a Mason's knowledge. Though something in the woman's demeanor triggered warning signals, Aria had been raised to respect pack hierarchies. Refusing an Alpha's request would dishonor her father. She followed the woman to a large black pavilion, the Blackthorn Alpha symbol emblazoned on its sides. Inside, Alpha Blackthorn waited, but Enlay was nowhere to be seen. "Drink," the Alpha commanded, offering a cup of what appeared to be traditional welcoming tea. Again, refusal would have been grave insult. Aria accepted the cup, raising it to her lips as custom demanded. The liquid tasted strange, bitter beneath the honey meant to disguise it. By the time she recognized something was wrong, darkness was already creeping at the edges of her vision. The last thing she remembered was Alpha Blackthorn's cold smile, and the tattooed woman beginning a chant in a language Aria didn't recognize. And then memory simply stopped. Aria gasped as they were thrust back into the present, the pendant now burning hot between their palms. Enlay's expression mirrored her own shock, his amber eyes wide with recognition and dawning anger. "We met before," she whispered, voice shaking. "Years before our arranged mating." "And my father?" Enlay's voice grew hard, pieces falling into place with sickening clarity. He recognized what was happening between us instantly, the potential true mate bond forming at first sight. "He had it blocked," Aria continued, the truth crystallizing as she spoke. "That woman, the one with the tattooed hands." "Madame Voss," Enlay supplied grimly, "Eastern Territories practitioner, my father's consultant on diplomatic matters." She was present at our mating ceremony years later, though kept in the background. The implications cascaded through Aria's mind. "He arranged our mating for political purposes, but ensured the true bond couldn't form," Enlay finished. "Keeping both packs dependent on his approval for the alliance to continue." A second wave of memory hit them both simultaneously, the pendant pulsing between their hands as another buried truth surfaced. 1 year ago, the night before their mating ceremony, Aria stood on the balcony of her guest quarters in the Blackthorn pack house, anxiety making sleep impossible. Tomorrow she would be ceremonially mated to a man she barely knew, Enlay Blackthorn, heir to the most powerful pack in the region. A strange sense of familiarity had haunted her since arriving at the Blackthorn territory, déjà vu without context, her wolf restless in ways she couldn't explain. Movement in the garden below caught her attention. Enlay walked alone among the moonlit paths, his expression troubled as he paused beneath the ancient oak. Something about his solitary figure called to her, drawing her down the stairs and into the night air, before conscious thought could intervene. He sensed her approach, turning with warrior's awareness even before she spoke. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked, stopping a respectful distance away. "No." His amber eyes studied her with unsettling intensity. "Do we know each other? Beyond the formal introductions, I mean." The question mirrored her own sense of inexplicable recognition. "I don't think so, but it feels like we should," he finished when she hesitated. They stood in uncomfortable silence, mutual awareness humming between them like a plucked string. When Enlay finally stepped closer, Aria's wolf surged toward the surface, with such force that she gasped aloud. "Something isn't right," he murmured, close enough now that she could feel the heat radiating from his tall frame. "This doesn't feel like a first meeting." Her hand rose of its own accord, fingers hovering just short of touching his chest where his heart would be. The pendant at her throat, the full Mason token she'd received on her 20th birthday, warmed against her skin. Before contact could be made, shadows moved at the garden's edge. Alpha Blackthorn emerged from the darkness, the tattooed woman at his side. "Preparations require your attention, son," the Alpha said coldly. "Return to the main house immediately." Enlay hesitated, confusion evident in his expression. "Father, Now!" The command brooked no refusal. As Enlay reluctantly turned away, the tattooed woman moved closer to Aria, something concealed in her palm. "A blessing for tomorrow's ceremony," she murmured, blowing a fine powder that caught Aria full in the face. The world spun, reality fragmenting around her. When she woke the next morning in her bed, the encounter in the garden had vanished from her memory. Until now. "Twice," Aria whispered as the second vision faded. "She interfered twice." Enlay's hands tightened around hers, the pendant still connecting them physically, as the ritual began to fade. "Once in our youth, when the bond might have formed naturally. And again before the ceremony, when proximity began breaking through the original block. Pieces were falling into place with devastating clarity. Her wolf's confused recognition of Enlay from their first formal meeting. The nightmares that had plagued her since the ceremony. The Mason pendant's unusual warmth whenever Enlay was near. "Your father wanted the alliance, but not a true bond," she said, understanding blooming fully. "A true mate bond would have given us independent authority that couldn't be manipulated." "Political expedience," Enlay confirmed, disgust evident in his voice. "Keeping both our packs dependent on his goodwill to maintain the alliance." The pendant gave one final pulse between their hands before cooling, the ritual complete. But something had changed, not just in their understanding, but in the energy between them. The artificial barrier that had kept their wolves separated despite mutual recognition had thinned significantly, weakened by truth's exposure. Aria could feel it. A channel opening between them, still fragile, but undeniably present. From Enlay's expression, he felt it too. "The block is dissolving," she said wonderingly, her wolf pushing closer to the surface with newfound freedom. "Now that we know the truth." Enlay released her hand slowly, though the connection between them remained, no longer dependent on physical contact. His amber eyes had taken on a golden glow that suggested his wolf was equally near the surface. "What now?" he asked, voice deeper than usual as his wolf influenced his human form. Aria closed her eyes, listening to her wolf with complete attention for perhaps the first time. The creature's message came with crystal clarity. He was always ours. From the first moment, when she opened her eyes, decision had crystallized within her. "We complete what was started 7 years ago, before the winter gathering, before your father can interfere again." Hope and caution warred in Enlay's expression. "You're certain?" Your bloodline's protection was never the true barrier, she finished for him. My wolf recognized you instantly, both times. It was external magic that prevented what should have happened naturally. She reached for his hand again, this time without the pendant between them. I need you to understand what this means, though. A Mason bond, once fully formed, can't be broken without devastating consequences. You've seen what happened to my mother when my father died. Enlay's fingers interlaced with hers. His touch gentle, despite the power evident in his large hands. I understand, and I accept whatever comes with being truly bound to you. Her wolf, suddenly communicative after years of confused resistance, urged her forward. For once, Aria found her human side in complete agreement with her wolf's certainty. Tonight, she said, decision made, under the stars, as wolves should bond. Enlay nodded, understanding the significance of her choice. Traditional mate bonds were completed in wolf form beneath open sky, with only the moon as witness. After political manipulation and ceremonial falseness, they would claim each other as nature intended. As they rose from the ritual circle, the connection between them continued strengthening, a gossamer thread becoming a cord. Still forming but increasingly resilient. Aria could sense Enlay's emotions now, faint but distinguishable from her own. His relief at finally understanding, his anger at his father's manipulation, and beneath both, a steady current of devotion that had survived a year of rejection and confusion. Her wolf called to his across this new connection, a tentative greeting that received immediate response. His wolf's answering call resonated through her entire being, deep, possessive, joyful, in a way that transcended human language. Mine, his wolf communicated with primal simplicity. Yours, her wolf acknowledged without hesitation. Always yours. The exchange happened without words. Pure wolf communication that their human sides witnessed with growing wonder. Not complete bonding yet, but its precursor. Wolves recognizing each other without interference for the first time since that summer day 7 years before. As they prepared for evening and the completion that would come with it, Aria felt certainty replacing doubt, truth displacing manipulation, choice overpowering coercion. Her grandmother's pendant hung between them now, a physical symbol of the connection forming in the space their shared truth had created. Tonight, they would claim beneath stars what had been wrongfully denied them, not as political arrangements or pack assets, but as wolves who had found each other despite every attempt to keep them apart. Twilight painted the forest in shades of amber and gold as Aria and Enlay prepared for their bonding ritual. The traditional items lay ready. Sacred herbs, ceremonial chalice for the blood sharing, and small gifts they would exchange to symbolize their commitment. After the revelation of Alpha Blackthorn's manipulation, they had agreed to complete their bond before confronting him. Unity before challenge. But fate had other plans. The warning came with the wind's shift. Unfamiliar wolf scents, approaching from multiple directions. Not rogues or random patrols, but coordinated movement with purpose. Blackthorn enforcers, Enlay confirmed, his body tensing as he scanned the tree line. At least 6. My father must have realized what we've discovered. Aria's fingers closed around the Mason pendant, its warmth confirming her suspicion. The ritual we performed, it didn't just reveal memories to us. It broke enough of the magical barrier that my father would have felt it. Enlay agreed grimly. Madame Voss would have alerted him immediately. Their eyes met in silent communication, the fledgling bond between them conveying understanding without words. Their planned bonding ceremony would have to wait. This confrontation couldn't be avoided any longer. "We need to face him directly," Aria said, gathering the ceremonial items and securing them in her pack. "Before he sends more wolves, tries another magical interference." Enlay nodded, resolution hardening his features into the warrior mask she now recognized as protection rather than coldness. "The Blackthorn stronghold is half a day's journey. If we travel through the night, we'll reach it by dawn," she finished. "When his power is at its weakest." The approaching wolves were closing in, clearly intending to surround them. Without discussion, they moved in perfect synchronicity, Enlay creating a false trail leading east, while Aria prepared a distraction that would cover their true escape west. As smoke from her carefully crafted herb bundle billowed upward, temporarily masking their scents, they slipped between the approaching patrol lines. Their movements complemented each other naturally, her stealth balancing his strength, his strategic mind enhancing her territorial knowledge. The newly forming bond hummed between them, not yet complete, but growing stronger with each challenge faced together. Through it, Aria could sense Enlay's determination, his protective instinct towards her warring with respect for her capabilities. She wondered what emotions he sensed from her. Resolve, certainly, but also the steadily building certainty that had replaced her long-held doubts. They travelled through the night, moving swiftly and silently through territory Enlay knew intimately. Occasionally, they caught signs of pursuit, but always managed to stay ahead, their wolves lending them endurance human forms alone couldn't maintain. Dawn found them on a ridge overlooking the Blackthorn stronghold, an imposing structure of stone and timber that had housed the ruling pack for generations. Even at this early hour, activity buzzed within its walls, suggesting their approach hadn't gone unnoticed. "He'll be in his study," Enlay said, eyes fixed on a window in the eastern wing. "Alone, as is his morning ritual." Aria studied the compound, noting guard positions and potential escape routes. "How do we get inside without being stopped?" A smile touched Enlay's lips. Not the cold one she'd once associated with him, but one tinged with mischief. "There are advantages to being the son who was expected to enforce security." He pointed toward a section of wall, partially concealed by ancient oak trees. "Hidden entrance, known only to the Alpha and Heir." Alpha Damon Blackthorn's private study reflected the man himself. Imposing, meticulously organized, and designed to intimidate. Dark wood paneling absorbed the morning light, massive bookshelves lined with leather-bound volumes, and a desk that resembled an altar more than a workspace dominated the room. The Alpha himself stood with his back to the door, gazing out a narrow window, hands clasped behind him. He didn't turn when they entered, though the slight stiffening of his shoulders betrayed his awareness. "I wondered when you'd arrive," he said, voice carrying the cold authority that had shaped Enlay's early years. "Though I expected you'd be brought in chains, not walking freely into my territory." He turned then, silver-streaked dark hair and amber eyes, so similar to Enlay's, yet lacking the warmth his son had discovered. His gaze settled on Aria, assessment giving way to calculation. "The Mason girl," he said, as if tasting the name. "You've proven more troublesome than anticipated." "Father," Enlay stepped forward, positioning himself slightly ahead of Aria without completely blocking her, protection without possession. "We know what you did. The memory block, the bond interference." Something flickered across the Alpha's face. Not guilt or shame, but irritation at being discovered. What I did was ensure the future of this pack. The alliance was necessary. A true bond was not. You had no right. Aria's voice remained steady, despite the anger burning beneath her skin. Interfering with a true mate bond violates our most sacred laws. Damon's smile held no warmth. Laws are tools. Girl, useful when they serve purpose, irrelevant when they don't. His gaze shifted to his son. I expected better from you, Enlay. I raised you to understand that leadership requires difficult choices. You raised me to believe honor was our foundation, Enlay replied, disappointment evident in his voice. There is no honor in what you did. The Alpha moved to his desk, every motion controlled and deliberate. Honor is a luxury for those without responsibility. I bear the weight of generations, past and future. He leveled his gaze at them both. A true bond between you would have created authority I couldn't control. The alliance needed to remain dependent on my approval. So you poisoned your own son's mate bond. Aria's words carried the weight of accusation. Twice. I secured his future, Damon corrected. And yours. The Mason bloodline needed protection after your father's death. Our arrangement provided that. While ensuring I remained leashed to your will, Enlay added, understanding dawning more completely. A mate bond would have given me independent standing with the council. You weren't ready. For the first time, something like justification entered the Alpha's tone. Still aren't, if this foolishness is evidence of your judgment. Aria felt Enlay's pain through their growing connection, the betrayal cutting deeper than he would show outwardly. Instinctively, she moved closer to him, their arms touching in silent support. The Alpha's eyes narrowed at the gesture. The memory block is dissolving, he observed. Madame Voss warned this might happen if you performed certain rituals. His expression hardened. It changes nothing. The winter gathering approaches. Without a completed bond, Enlay's position remains vulnerable, and your pack's protection contingent on my goodwill. We intend to complete our bond, Aria stated, chin lifting in defiance. Tonight. Something dangerous flashed in Damon's eyes. I think not. His hand moved to a cord hanging beside his desk, pulling it with deliberate slowness. You'll both remain here until Madame Voss returns from the Eastern Territories. She has methods for more permanent solutions. The door opened behind them, revealing 4 enforcers. Wolves selected for size and fighting prowess, their expressions impassive as they awaited orders. Escort my son and his mate to the North Wing guest quarters, Damon instructed. They are not to leave under any circumstances. Enlay's posture shifted subtly, weight centering in preparation for conflict. Through their connection, Aria sensed his strategic assessment. 4 enforcers plus his father, confined space, limited options. Don't make this more difficult than necessary, Damon advised, noting his son's stance. Accept confinement with dignity, and perhaps we can discuss more amenable arrangements after you've had time to reconsider. We're leaving, Enlay stated simply. Now! The Alpha's expression hardened. Take them, he ordered the enforcers. Unharmed, but secured. What followed happened with bewildering speed. The first enforcer lunged toward Aria, clearly considering her the easier target. His mistake. Her grandmother's training and her own natural gifts made her far more dangerous than her slight frame suggested. She pivoted, using the enforcer's momentum against him, sending him crashing into a bookshelf with a precision move that left him momentarily stunned. Simultaneously, Enlay engaged the remaining 3. his fighting style combining formal training with primal wolf strength. Their movements synchronized naturally, as if they'd trained together for years, rather than fought separately their entire lives. When an enforcer slipped past Enlay's guard, Aria was already there, delivering a precise strike to vulnerable nerve points. When another tried to circle behind her, Enlay's awareness extended to cover her blind spot. The fledgling bond between them amplified their natural abilities, creating a fighting unit more effective than either alone. Through it, they anticipated each other's movements, sensed approaching threats, and coordinated without words. Alpha Blackthorn watched with growing alarm as his elite enforcers found themselves outmatched, not by superior strength, but by unprecedented coordination. When he moved to join the fight himself, Enlay intercepted him with practiced efficiency, years of restrained emotion finally finding expression in the perfect execution of techniques the father himself had taught. "You taught me too well," Enlay said, as they locked in momentary stalemate, strength against strength. "Did you think I wouldn't eventually surpass you?" Rage contorted Damon's features. "You are nothing without my guidance," he snarled, breaking the hold with a vicious move that would have incapacitated a lesser opponent. "Nothing!" Enlay absorbed the blow, redirecting its force as he'd been trained to do since childhood. "I am everything you feared I might become," he corrected. Strong enough to lead without cruelty, powerful enough to choose connection over control. Their fight carried them across the study, while Aria continued engaging the enforcers, her smaller frame allowing her to use the confined space to advantage. Through the bond, she felt Enlay's conflict. The son who had spent a lifetime seeking approval, now forced to physically confront the father who had betrayed him. The dynamic shifted abruptly when one enforcer managed to pin Aria against the wall, his greater weight threatening to overwhelm her defense. In that moment of danger, something primitive awakened in Enlay, a protective rage that surged through their connection with such force. It momentarily staggered his father. Using the opening, Enlay delivered a precise strike that sent the Alpha stumbling backward into his desk. In the same fluid movement, he crossed the room, tearing the enforcer away from Aria with enough force to send the man crashing through the study door into the hallway beyond. The remaining enforcers hesitated, witnessing their Alpha momentarily bested and the unexpected power of the not-quite bonded pair. Damon recovered quickly, blood trickling from a split lip as he straightened. "Enough!" he commanded, voice reverberating with Alpha authority. "Stand down!" he ordered the enforcers, his calculating mind already reassessing the situation. Temporary silence fell across the room, broken only by heavy breathing and the creaking of disturbed furniture. "You've made your point," Damon said, eyes never leaving his son. "Perhaps negotiation is in order after all." "There's nothing to negotiate," Enlay replied, moving to stand beside Aria. "We're leaving. The bond will be completed. And at the winter gathering, the council will hear exactly what you've done." The Alpha's expression shifted from anger to something more calculating. "Consider carefully before making threats," he advised. "Exposure works both ways. Do you truly want every pack in the territories to know the Mason heir required magical intervention to form a proper bond? What that suggests about her bloodline stability?" Aria felt the barb land, not with her, but with Enlay, whose protective instinct flared through their connection. His father had identified and targeted a vulnerability. Enlay would sacrifice himself before allowing her reputation to suffer. Before he could respond, 4 more enforcers appeared at the broken doorway, summoned by the commotion. Their advantage was evaporating with each passing moment. And then Aria felt it, a flicker of power from the Mason pendant still hanging around her neck. Its warmth intensified as her grandmother's words echoed in her memory. The pendant clears the path between true mates when the bearer is ready to accept the connection. Understanding bloomed within her. Their partial bond had given them strength to fight as one, but only a complete bond would give them the power to escape this trap. The final barrier wasn't magical interference anymore. It was her own lingering hesitation, the last shadow of fear that had kept her from full surrender. In that moment of clarity, surrounded by enemies in the heart of hostile territory, Aria made her choice. Reaching for Enlay's hand, she pressed the pendant between their palms. "Bond with me," she whispered, voice carrying through their connection, more than through the air between them. "Now! Here!" Surprise flashed across his features. "The ceremony was never what mattered," she finished. "Only the choice. And I choose you, Enlay Blackthorn. I accept this bond and all it means." Understanding dawned in his amber eyes. A true bond required no ceremony, no ritual items. Only mutual acceptance and the mingling of blood to seal the connection. Everything else was tradition rather than necessity. As the enforcers moved to surround them, Enlay made a swift decision. Using his thumbnail, he scored a shallow cut across his palm, then did the same to hers. Their blood mingled as their hands clasped, the pendant between them growing searingly hot. "I accept this bond and all it means," he echoed, the formal words of claiming resonating through every fibre of their beings. Alpha Blackthorn recognized what was happening a moment too late. "Stop them!" he commanded, lunging forward. But something had already begun. A transformation more profound than their usual shifts. The pendant flared with blinding light as the Mason bloodline magic recognized and activated the true bond that had been denied for 7 years. Power cascaded through them both, the connection that had been forming between them suddenly crystallizing into something unbreakable. Where before they had sensed echoes of each other's emotions, now they experienced them as if they were their own. Where their wolves had called to each other across distance, now they moved in perfect unison, sharing consciousness while maintaining individuality. The completion happened in seconds, but felt like eternity. 2 souls recognizing each other with absolute certainty. 2 wolves finally claiming what had always been theirs. 2 humans surrendering to vulnerability with complete trust. When the light faded, Aria and Enlay stood transformed. Not physically, but in the unmistakable aura of power that surrounded newly bonded true mates. The Mason bloodline gift, once activated, created bonds of exceptional strength, radiating authority that even an alpha would recognize. Damon Blackthorn stared at them, comprehension and something like fear crossing his features. "What have you done?" he whispered. "What you tried to prevent," Enlay answered, his voice carrying new resonance as the bond settled between them. "We've claimed our birthright." Through the bond, Aria felt Enlay's wolf surge forward, responding to threat with protective dominance. Her own wolf rose to meet it, their combined strength flowing through human bodies not yet shifted, but carrying the unmistakable presence of apex predators. The enforcers sensed it immediately, instinctively backing away from the newly bonded pair. Even Alpha Blackthorn, for all his arrogance, recognized the power shift that had occurred in his own territory. "The Council will hear of this," he warned, though the threat had lost its edge. "Yes," Aria agreed, her voice steady and sure in a way it had never been before. "They will. Every detail of your interference, and how the bond formed despite it. With the enforcers no longer blocking their path, and the Alpha momentarily stunned by this turn of events, they moved toward the door in perfect unison. No one attempted to stop them, the bond's power creating an almost visible shield around them that none dared challenge. As they reached the doorway, Enlay paused, looking back at his father one last time. "The winter gathering will determine leadership based on truth, not manipulation," he said. "Neither vindictive nor gloating, simply stating fact. Prepare accordingly." They left as they had arrived, together, unhindered, their steps perfectly matched as they walked through corridors where wolves scrambled to give them passage. The news spread ahead of them in whispers. True bond formed. Mason bloodline. Alpha challenged. Outside, in the clear morning air, Aria finally had a moment to absorb what had happened. The bond hummed between them, stronger than she had imagined possible, carrying not just emotions, but thoughts, sensations, memories. A connection so complete it would have terrified her former self. Yet, instead of the feared loss of self, she experienced expansion. Her consciousness broader, deeper, more fully alive for being shared. Enlay's presence within the bond felt like coming home to a place she hadn't known she was missing. "You chose," he said softly as they cleared the compound walls, his amber eyes filled with wonder and gratitude. "In the middle of battle, surrounded by enemies, you chose the bond." Aria smiled, the expression containing new confidence. "I realized the only thing truly standing between us was my fear," she admitted. And in that moment, with everything at stake, fear seemed the poorest reason to deny what we both knew was true. He reached for her hand, their fingers interlacing naturally. Through the bond she felt his joy, his pride in her courage, and beneath both, a love that had waited patiently for her to be ready to receive it. "What happens now?" he asked, though they both sensed the answer through their new connection. "Now," she replied, "we face the winter gathering together, as we should have years ago." The pendant hung between them, cooler now, but still glowing with gentle light. A physical symbol of the bond that now connected them beyond any possibility of separation. What Alpha Blackthorn had feared and tried to prevent had come to pass. A union of equals whose combined strength would reshape pack politics throughout the territories. As they walked away from the Blackthorn stronghold, Aria felt the last of her doubts dissolving. The path ahead would not be easy. Confronting the council, establishing their leadership, rebuilding trust between packs. But they would face it together, their blood bond giving them strength neither could have possessed alone. Whatever came next, they would meet it as true mates. Exactly as fate had intended from that first moment 7 summers ago, when their wolves recognized what their human hearts had only now fully embraced. 3 days after their confrontation with Alpha Blackthorn, Aria and Enlay stood at the edge of the ancient grove that marked the border between territories. Known as the Silverwood, these sacred grounds had witnessed claiming runs for generations. Neutral territory where newly bonded pairs could complete their union without interference from any pack. The full moon hung low in the early evening sky, casting silver light through ancient branches. perfect conditions for what tradition required. "Are you certain?" Enlay asked, his thumb tracing gentle circles on the back of her hand. Through their bond, she felt his desire to protect Warring with recognition of her strength. "We've already formed the blood bond. The claiming run is necessary," Aria finished gently. "For us, and for those who will follow our leadership." She understood his concern. Though their blood bond had formed in that moment of danger in his father's study, pack law still required the traditional claiming run to recognize their union officially. Without it, challenges to their position could arise at the winter gathering. The claiming run was deeply sacred. Wolves chasing beneath moon and stars, culminating in the physical joining that would complete their bond in every sense. It was also dangerous. Other wolves, particularly those loyal to Alpha Blackthorn, might view the run as the opportunity for interference. Elder Ruth approached them from where the small gathering of witnesses had assembled. Mostly members of Aria's mother's pack, with a few trusted Blackthorn wolves who had secretly supported Enlay's vision for leadership. The old woman carried a wooden bowl containing sacred herbs and oils. "The ancestors are restless tonight," Ruth observed, her weathered hands steady as she began anointing their foreheads with the mixture. "They sense change approaching." "Good change or bad?" Aria asked, breathing in the familiar scent of moonflower and sage. Ruth's eyes crinkled at the corners. "Change is neither good nor bad until we shape it with our actions, child." Her gaze shifted to their clasped hands, where the bond mark had appeared after their blood sharing, a crescent overlapping a mountain peak. Symbols of their respective bloodlines now permanently etched into their skin. "Your grandmother would be proud. She always believed the Mason and Blackthorn lines were meant to join truly, not merely through political arrangement." When the anointing was complete, Ruth stepped back, addressing the gathered witnesses. "The claiming run begins at moonrise," she announced, her voice carrying surprising strength. "The pair run separately until the female chooses to be caught. What follows belongs only to them and the sacred ground that witnesses it." Murmurs of acknowledgement rippled through the small crowd. The claiming run's outcome was predetermined. They were already bonded. But its symbolism remained vital. In wolf tradition, the female led, setting the pace and choosing when to allow herself to be caught. It represented the freely given consent at the heart of true mate bonds. "I'll find you," Enlay promised softly, his amber eyes reflecting moonlight as he gazed down at her. "No matter how far you run." Through their bond, Aria felt the layers beneath his words. Not possession, but devotion. Not conquest, but partnership. Patience woven through determination. She reached up, fingers tracing the strong line of his jaw. "I know," she replied simply. "That's why I'll finally stop running." As Ruth announced the final preparations, Aria moved toward the women's preparation area while Enlay joined the men. Tradition dictated they would shift separately before the run began, becoming wolves under different skies before reuniting beneath the moon. Aria's mother waited in the preparation area, her presence unexpected but welcome, though still bearing the hollow-eyed look of a woman who had lost her true mate. Tonight, something like hope animated her features. "I wasn't sure you'd come," Aria said, as her mother helped her remove the ceremonial robe, preparing for the shift. "I wasn't sure either," her mother admitted, fingers gentle as she unbound Aria's hair. "But I dreamed of your grandmother last night. She insisted I witness what she always foresaw." What was that? Her mother's smile held bittersweet knowing. The healing of what should never have been broken. Her fingers traced the bond mark on Aria's hand. She knew, you know. Even when you were small, she told me your bond would form with the Blackthorn, but not as the Pax expected. The revelation settled over Aria like a final puzzle piece, clicking into place. Is that why she gave me the pendant? Why she taught me the memory rituals? She was preparing you to recognize truth when it finally surfaced. Her mother's hand stilled on her shoulders. The pain of losing your true mate is beyond description, daughter. But what I've learned is that the joy of having found them at all makes that risk worthwhile. The simple declaration, from a woman who had lived both the greatest joy and deepest sorrow a bonded mate could experience, sealed Aria's certainty. Whatever came after tonight, she would face it without regret. As the moon reached its zenith, Aria stood alone at the entrance to the sacred grove, her human form shed like an unnecessary garment. Her wolf, silver grey with distinctive white markings that proclaimed her Mason bloodline, trembled with anticipation rather than fear. From across the clearing, Enlay's wolf emerged, midnight black with amber eyes that glowed in the darkness. Larger than hers, powerful in a way that would once have triggered her defenses, but now awakened only recognition. Mine, her wolf acknowledged without reservation. Elder Ruth's voice carried across the clearing. The claiming run begins. May the ancestors witness the union of bloodlines long destined to join. Aria's wolf didn't hesitate. With one last look at her mate, she turned and bounded into the sacred forest, feeling rather than hearing Enlay's answering howl behind her. The traditional head start would give her time to choose their claiming ground. The sacred responsibility of the female to select where their bond would be completed. Running as wolf had always been freedom for Aria, but tonight it was transcendence. Her paws barely seemed to touch the forest floor as she navigated familiar paths made new by moonlight and purpose. Through the bond, she sensed Enlay's patient pursuit, giving her space to lead while maintaining the connection between them. She ran not to escape but to celebrate. The joy of movement, the wind through her fur, the knowledge that this journey had destination rather than endless flight. Her wolf's spirit soared with newfound certainty, reveling in strength that came not from isolation but from chosen connection. The sacred grove contained many traditional claiming grounds, each with significance. Couples seeking prosperity might choose the ancient oak clearing. Those valuing wisdom often selected the starlit pool. Warriors traditionally claimed at the stone circle that represented strength. Aria's wolf knew precisely where she was heading. The hot spring, a small clearing surrounding a natural hot spring shaped like a perfect heart, had been used for generations by those whose bonds transcended political alliance to forge something deeper. Her grandmother had once told her it was where the most powerful bonds were sealed, where magic and nature converged to amplify what already existed between true mates. She arrived at the clearing, circling the steaming spring once, before coming to rest at its edge. Steam rose in silvery tendrils, moonlight catching each droplet until the air itself seemed to shimmer with magic. The perfect place to complete what had begun 7 years before, when their wolves first recognized each other. Through their bond, she sent not words but feeling, readiness, welcome, invitation. I am no longer running. Find me now. Enlay's response came immediately, warmth flooding their connection. as his wolf changed direction, heading unerringly toward her location. No tracking required. No hesitation. Guided by a bond that could now span any distance. Minutes later, he emerged from the forest's edge, magnificent black wolf with eyes that held both animal intelligence and human devotion. He approached slowly, offering respect even in this moment of claiming, waiting for her final signal. Aria's wolf lowered her head in traditional acceptance, then raised it to release a howl that echoed through the sacred grove. The female's call that completed the invitation. Enlay's answering howl joined hers, their voices twining in harmony that seemed to make the very air vibrate with power. As their song faded, the final transformation began. Wolves yielding to human form in the sacred space where both aspects could be honored equally. The shift happened simultaneously, fur retreating, limbs elongating, until they stood facing each other in human form beside the steaming heart-shaped spring. Enlay's amber eyes held reverence as he gazed at her. "You chose the hot spring," he said, voice roughened by the shift and emotion. "The place of true bonds. The only place worthy of what we found," she replied, extending her hand to him across the small distance that separated them. When their fingers touched, the bond flared between them. No longer just emotional connection, but physical awareness that made every sensation heightened, every touch amplified. Through it, Aria felt Enlay's wonder and desire mingled with deep tenderness, his need to claim balanced by determination to cherish. They moved together by mutual accord, stepping into the warm waters of the spring that tradition held had been blessed by the first mated wolves. Steam rose around them as they waded deeper, until they stood chest deep in the heart's center, the water's natural minerals soothing tired muscles and awakening something more primal. "All those years," Enlay murmured, hands tracing reverent patterns across her shoulders. "I couldn't understand why something felt missing. Why I recognized you without knowing you. Why being near you felt like coming home, even while you seemed determined to leave." Aria's hands found his chest, palms flat against the strong heartbeat beneath warm skin. "I was running from what I needed most," she admitted. "Afraid of needing someone so completely that losing them would destroy me." Her fingers traced upward, mapping the strong column of his throat, the defined jaw that had once seemed stern, but now represented steadiness. "But I've learned there's greater risk in never claiming what belongs to you. And I belong to you," he said simply, the statement carrying neither question nor demand, simply truth. "As I belong to you," she answered, the words releasing the last shadow of resistance within her spirit. When their lips met, the bond between them ignited with new awareness. Sensation echoing between their minds, pleasure doubling as each experienced the other's response alongside their own. Not loss of self, as Aria had once feared, but expansion. Consciousness enriched rather than diminished by sharing. Hands explored with newfound freedom, learning curves and planes that would soon become as familiar as their own bodies. Through their bond, each touch carried perfect knowledge. What brought pleasure, what awakened desire, what caused the small sounds that echoed across the steaming water. Together, they sank deeper into the spring, letting the warm mineral water support their weight as natural buoyancy brought their bodies into alignment. Limbs entwined with instinctive coordination, No awkwardness or hesitation as the bond guided them into harmony that transcended physical union while celebrating it. When they finally joined completely, the claiming both physical and spiritual, the bond between them flared with blinding intensity. The water around them began to glow with soft blue light, responding to the power generated by their union. Ancient magic awakened as bloodlines meant to join finally completed their connection in the sacred place prepared for exactly this purpose. Their shared pleasure built not in isolation, but in synergy, each feeling the other's response, creating feedback that intensified every sensation. When release finally came, it swept through them both simultaneously. Ecstasy multiplied by sharing, completion that transcended physical joining to touch something eternal. As they floated together afterward, limbs still entwined and hearts beating in perfect synchrony, the water around them continued to pulse with soft blue luminescence. The bond between them had taken final form, unbreakable, permanent, exactly as nature had intended from their first meeting. "I feel you," Aria whispered, wonder coloring her voice as she experienced the full depth of their connection for the first time. Not just emotions, but everything. Your thoughts, memories, even the sensations of your body alongside my own. Enlay nodded, one hand gently brushing wet hair from her forehead. "The Mason bloodline gift," he said. Ruth explained that when fully activated, it creates bonds of exceptional depth. Few experience this level of connection. She explored the bond cautiously, marveling at how completely they were joined while maintaining separate identities. "It should terrify me," she admitted, "this level of vulnerability. But instead, it feels like finding a part of myself I never knew was missing." His smile held understanding beyond his years, evidence of the wisdom she now felt flowing through their connection. Because true bonds don't diminish us. They complete what was always meant to be whole. They might have remained longer in that sacred space, exploring their new connection, but the bond suddenly flared with warning, alertness spiking through both of them simultaneously. Danger approaching, hostile intent. Without words, they separated and emerged from the spring, skin steaming in the cool night air as they scanned the forest edge. Through their heightened senses, they detected movement. Multiple wolves approaching with stealth that suggested purpose rather than coincidence. Blackthorn enforcers, Enlay confirmed, recognizing the patterns of movement he had once helped design. 7, maybe 8. Aria felt his strategic mind engaging through their bond, assessing options with the clarity of a born leader. "Your father sent them to interrupt the claiming," she realized, anger flaring alongside caution. "He knows the run must be completed for our position to be secure." "Too late." Enlay's smile held grim satisfaction. "The bond is formed completely now. Nothing can break it." But both recognized the continuing danger. Tired from their run and the energy expended in completing their bond, they faced multiple opponents who would be fresh and prepared for confrontation. "We need to reach the witnesses," Aria said, mind already calculating the quickest path back to where Ruth and the others waited. Any violence during a claiming run would be sacrilege. Even your father's supporters wouldn't risk that if others are watching. As the first enforcer emerged from the tree line, Enlay moved protectively beside her, their bodies automatically aligning for mutual defense. But before either could shift back to wolf form, something unexpected happened. The bond between them pulsed with power that seemed to draw energy from the sacred ground itself. The bond marks on their hands began to glow with the same blue luminescence that had filled the spring during their joining. The light spread upward, tracing veins and arteries until both of them were outlined in soft blue radiance that illuminated the clearing in otherworldly light. The approaching enforcers faltered, primal instinct recognizing power beyond ordinary pack hierarchy. Through their bond, Aria accessed knowledge she hadn't consciously possessed, understanding of what was happening that seemed to come from ancestral memory rather than personal experience. The bloodline magic, she whispered, wonder replacing fear as energy continued building between them. When true mates complete their bond on sacred ground, the ancestors bear witness and lend their strength. Enlay nodded, ancient knowledge flowing through their connection. The light reveals truth, he said, certainty in his voice. No deception can stand before it. As if confirming his words, the light emanating from them intensified, expanding outward in a gentle wave that washed over the enforcers who had emerged from the trees. As it touched each wolf, something remarkable happened. The light revealed connections, loyalties, intentions, made visible as colored threads, extending from each figure. Most glowed deep red, signifying loyalty to Alpha Blackthorn. But more significant were the sickly green tendrils that wrapped around several wolves' throats and minds. Magical compulsion, not freely given allegiance. Your father's enforcer, Captain, Aria said, recognizing the pattern from her grandmother's teachings. He's under magical coercion. Understanding dawned in Enlay's expression. My father has been using Madame Voss's magic, not just against us, but against his own pack. The betrayal cut deep, but brought clarity rather than pain through their completed bond. He's no true alpha. He's maintaining control through manipulation. The revelation changed everything. Among wolves, using magical coercion against pack members violated the most sacred tenets of leadership. An alpha's authority came from strength, wisdom, and freely given loyalty, never from magical compulsion. In silent agreement, they stepped forward together, the blue light surrounding them growing stronger rather than dimmer with each move. The enforcer captain, a battle-scarred grey wolf Enlay had known since childhood, growled warning but made no move to attack. We see the truth, Callum, Enlay addressed the captain directly. The magical binding he's placed on you and others. This is not freely given loyalty. The captain's wolf form trembled, conflict evident as the magical compulsion warred with the truth being revealed by their bond light. Around him, other enforcers showed similar signs of struggle, consciousness fighting against artificial constraint. Aria reached for Enlay's hand, their fingers interlacing as they faced the enforcers together. Through their bond, she offered her bloodline's healing gift, channeling it through their connection until it joined with Enlay's natural leadership strength. By the authority of our completed bond, they spoke in unison, voices harmonizing in a way that made the very air vibrate with power. We reveal truth and break false bonds. The blue light pulsed outward in a concentrated wave, washing over the enforcers with gentle but irresistible force. Where it touched the sickly green tendrils of magical compulsion, those constraints dissolved. Not violently, but naturally, like ice melting under spring sunshine. One by one, the enforcers shuddered, as awareness returned fully to their own control. Captain Callum was the first to respond, dropping to a submissive posture before rising and backing away several steps. Not in fear, but respect. acknowledging power greater than the one that had bound him. Through their bond, Aria and Enlay sensed the shift in the clearing's energy. Threat transformed to wary respect. Hostility yielding to recognition of legitimate authority. These wolves had been sent to prevent the completion of a bond that had already formed beyond any possibility of interference. Captain Callum shifted to human form, kneeling briefly before standing to address them. "The claiming is witnessed," he acknowledged formally, the traditional words carrying weight beyond their simple meaning. "And truth is revealed." The other enforcers shifted as well, each offering the formal acknowledgement that traditionally closed the claiming run. What had been intended as interruption had transformed into official witness, exactly what pack law required for the bond to be recognized. "Return to the Blackthorn stronghold," Enlay instructed, his voice carrying the natural authority that had always been his birthright. "Tell those who sent you what you've seen here tonight. Tell them the bond is complete, and the truth has been revealed." Callum nodded solemnly. "And will you return with us? Rightful Alpha?" The question, unexpected but significant, hung in the night air. Through their bond, Aria felt Enlay's momentary surprise, giving way to resolution. His father's use of magical coercion against pack members had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. Leadership succession could not wait for the winter gathering. It had become immediate necessity. "We will return," Enlay confirmed, glancing at Aria for confirmation she freely gave through their bond. "But first, we complete the claiming ceremony with those who came to witness it properly." As the enforcers departed, melting back into the forest with new purpose, Aria and Enlay returned to the heart spring to retrieve their ceremonial robes. The blue light surrounding them had dimmed to a subtle glow, still visible, but no longer blinding in its intensity. "That was unexpected," Aria said as they dressed, her fingers still tingling with the power that had flowed through them. Enlay smiled, the expression containing wonder and determination in equal measure. "Perhaps not. Your grandmother's journal mentioned that true bonds formed on sacred ground can reveal hidden truths." His hand found hers, their bond marks still faintly luminescent where they touched. "But I don't think either of us anticipated quite how literal that revelation would be." Together, they walked back toward the waiting witnesses, their strides naturally matching, the completed bond humming between them with sustained power. Whatever challenges awaited at the Blackthorn stronghold, confrontation with his father, establishing new leadership, healing the damage done by years of manipulation, they would face them together. The claiming run had transformed not just their personal bond, but the future of both packs. In completing what should have happened years before, they had set in motion changes that would reshape leadership throughout the territories. As they approached the gathered witnesses, Elder Ruth's knowing smile welcomed them. "The ancestors are pleased," she observed, taking in the subtle glow still surrounding them. "The balance long disturbed begins to right itself." Aria's mother stepped forward, tears in her eyes as she embraced her daughter. "The bond is complete," she whispered. "I can see it in both of you." "More than complete," Aria replied softly. "It revealed truth we hadn't sought but needed to find." As the traditional claiming ceremony concluded with blessings and celebrations, Aria and Enlay stood together beneath the moon that had witnessed their union. Through their bond flowed certainty that transcended the challenges ahead, the knowledge that whatever came next, they would face it as they were always meant to. Together, their strength multiplied, rather than divided by the bond that had finally claimed them both. In the distance, howls began, the enforcers spreading word of what they had witnessed. Truth passing from wolf to wolf across territories long manipulated by one alpha's ambition. By morning, every pack would know. A true bond had formed between Mason and Blackthorn bloodlines. Sacred ground had revealed hidden truths, and leadership built on deception had begun to crumble. The claiming run had ended. Their journey together had just begun.